We'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2.3, roll call. And we see that student trustee Farmer's present, trustee Nielsen, trustee Croninger, trustee Miller, trustee Marty Bloom is on vacation, trustee Hasland.
All chairs are full.
Okay, and trustee Aboud. We don't have any recognitions.
No.
And so we'll go item 2.6. If, we already have, so we have two items to be taken out of order. We have the foundation report. Is Jeff Green here? Or somebody from the foundation going to do that for Jeff? He stepped out? Okay. And then if the board is okay, we would like to also take item, where are they? 10.7, 2008-2019 board goals out of order. Is everybody okay with that? Trustee Nielsen?
Okay.
Student trustee Farmer? Trustee Miller, is that good? Trustee Hasland?
I'm trying to figure out where you are.
If we move up 10.7, 2018-19 board goals. So per our board policy, the board goals need to be developed by August, and so they're important. And so to be mindful of giving the time allocated, if we kind of get that through while folks are nice and fresh, we can do that? Yeah? Okay.
Jeff is back.
Oh, great. Okay, so then that brings us all the way back up to our foundation report. Jeff Green, are you ready for us? Okay, great.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the trustee board. I know it's been a while, but I'm very happy on a campus kickoff day to give you a bit of an update on where we are with the foundation. In your packet, there were just a couple of documents, and we kept it simple in part because right now, your close of business is our close of business, so we're in the midst of our audit. And so what you have in front of you and what I did put in your packet is actually the draft balance sheet and the draft income statement that actually has gone to our auditors that we're having a conversation about right now. And although there are always minor changes when you go through an audit, I'm confident enough in these numbers that I can share with you the highlights and give you a sense of where we ended up this last fiscal year. So let me start by just saying that it was a very good year. This morning in front of the assembled campus leadership and faculty and staff, administrators, I did give some basic numbers. I think the thing to look at on this is our balance sheet. What has happened for us this year is we've actually crossed the $65 million line, which is an all-time high for our asset base. And if you subtract the liabilities from that, we're still at about $61 million. So the foundation is very healthy. We had a very good year, and in fact, we're in a position to continue to do what we've been doing these last few years and even more in the 18-19 school year. I will focus on two things on this sheet, and I know it's a bit fuzzy, so if you're looking in your packets, if you look at the very bottom under fund balance, it's really the last three lines, unrestricted, temporarily restricted, permanently restricted, before that total liabilities fund balance line. You'll see there a very refreshing number, and that is the unrestricted balance as of the end of the year is about $3.6 million. Now you'll notice at the end of last year it was about $510,000. That is due to a very generous estate gift that came to us in June. And it was much larger than we'd expected. About half of it was restricted. We knew it was coming, but we didn't know is that there was a considerable amount of unrestricted money coming with it. And so that gives us that flexibility and that safety net once again to operate and not worry about the ability to raise funds. You've probably heard some of what I was saying to my board and what Dr. Beebe had shared about how being an independent, it's tough when you get to the point where you're raising all your own dollars and you may not make it because you kind of have to take the eye off the ball and not raise dollars for the college and its students so much, but just for your operations. So having a number like that there really gives us some more confidence. We've had it in the past, it's been a long time, and that helps us tremendously. If you go to the next sheet, thank you, Liz. The income statement. So this is where some of the really good news shows up. If you look at that first line of contributions, over $7 million in this last fiscal year came in restricted for various college programs. That's compared to $4.7 million the prior year and a budget of $5 million. What really pushed us over the top was that large estate. We were very close to making our regular budget, but when that came through, it got a good deal bigger. You can see also, though, under that just given the way investment markets acted in this past year, and I would divide that into two periods, the period from July 1, 2017 through January 26th, and then everything since then. But nonetheless, it ended up being about a $2.5 million positive year for us for our long-term permanent investments. And those are all the endowments that we hold for you. So that's our scholarship endowments, it's our program endowments, it's everything that is endowed permanently for the college. So you can see the program support top $10 million there, and that's only the second time in our 42-year history that that's happened. This morning I said it may be best all time, then I did my homework, and so I got to tell you it's our second best. I still kind of like it though. I will tell you then that what that means, if you look at the unrestricted income, which is our operating support that we have to raise, we did do very well there. And we ended up in our year, once all was said and done, some of those unrestricted assets do come over. So we will have been able to bring in all the money necessary to run our operation as well as do everything we do for the college. So that's where that $11 million figure that I mentioned this morning comes in. So that's the total income for the year. A little over $8 million of that was raised, and a little over $3 million of that was earned through our investment. So that's the way to think of that division. If you go to the bottom, you can see the division by expenditure type, and I think this is just good to look at. Scholarships and student support show up as $800,000. That's because we have to, in the way you do our accrual accounting, you have to zero out any unused scholarship money from a prior year, and that's what happened here. The actual distribution was over $1 million again, and that's been steady for several years, and that's looking to remain steady. There's not a lot that's going to change the $1 million annual distribution for scholarships, but as you may know, scholarship dollars when distributed are not always taken and used, and sometimes they're returned. So that's what's zeroed out in that number. The SBCC Promise cost us $2.2 million last year, so that was the first year of its full cost. The prior year, it's $1.1 million per cohort, or per year for both cohorts, however you want to think about it. And so our first cohort, which are the students that came in 2016 from all of our local schools, have completed their first 2 years. So basically the first chapter of the SBCC Promise is now complete. We're working on the data from that, but it's about $2 million a year now. So 2.2 in perpetuity is what we expect. Program support this past year was only at 1.57 million. That number really vacillates basically depending on what's requested. So we have a lot of endowments, and depending on if a faculty member, a chair, a dean, an administrator requests dollars for a particular purpose, then we distribute them. If not, we hang on to them. And so you can see last year it was 2.4, this year it was 1.6. Some years it's been as high as 3.5, so it really just depends each year on what folks need and ask for. We then also fleshed out the Thomas Fire and Flood response, and I want you to see there the $40,000 I mentioned that went actually to all campus communities. So that's students, staff, and faculty that asked for assistance starting on December 20th when we put out that offer. Every request was paid in full, so we didn't have to parse it out. We were able to fully fund what everyone needed, and that for our campus community was just over $40,000. The 727 is the combined of the two larger grassroots efforts that we agreed to facilitate their economics, basically. We acted as their fiscal agent. That's the Bucket Brigade and the Santa Barbara Support Network. So both of those are still under our roof. They're spinning out to be independently incorporated right now, but sometime in this fiscal year they will leave us and become independent. But for now they're on our books, and that's what that is. And that number is actually over $1 million as of the end of July. Last thing I will share with you on this is really the highlights. And I would say that the two are that trust I mentioned. The actual value of that trust ended up being $6.2 million, and that's what came to us in June. And the other big one this last year was the agreement from Cottage Health to go ahead and re-up their 3-year commitment to support our nursing students, and that's a $1.5 million commitment over 3 years. So all of that is booked to this fiscal year. So I'll stop there, take a deep breath. I do want to acknowledge the contributions not only from the folks I'm looking at right now who are sitting in front of me, but all the staff, faculty, students. We have donors all across this campus who've been part of this. Of course, our own board, please know that that's a volunteer board of over 30 folks that I get to work with. And of course, my colleagues, a total staff of 12 now, and we believe that this is the this is the team we're going to have in the foreseeable future. So we look forward to working with you in all number of ways going forward. I'm happy to answer any questions if anything's up. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the raising of money for the Promise program. Has that been difficult? Has it been easy? Do they come in larger chunks? Do they come in smaller chunks?
Well, it comes in all sizes. The largest donors were $250,000 a year commitments, and we had 2 of those for multi-year commitments, and then we walked down from there. So 2 at $250, several at $100, about probably a half dozen in the $50 to $75 range. So that's sort of the pyramid of that, and then all the way down to $5 here and there. We've really not done a public campaign yet. It's interesting. We did it very much inside the family to start it off with, and we did so well with that we kept it there for now. We've done a lot of advertising and messaging and marketing around it, but we haven't done a full-fledged fundraising campaign for the general public. So you'll see that coming. The second thing about it is that the state's 2 decisions in July and October of last year made it much more difficult. So the rebranding of the Board of Governors fee waiver to be called now the California Promise Grant has certainly muddied the waters, and I think in two places. It's confusing for students and it's confusing for donors. So we do have donors saying, oh, well, the state's taking care of it now, right? And of course I have to say, actually, no, nothing's changed. It's just a rebranding. And then AB 19. And of course, AB 19 is still an open question. So until the campus decides how to use those dollars, we won't be sure quite how to message that, but it's known as the California College Promise. And now that shows up on materials around the state too. And so folks ask me, isn't that the promise? And I say, well, no, that's not the SBCC promise. And both of those things are actually much smaller in total impact than what we're doing with privately raised funds. So that's probably the biggest challenge. And I have been working with the chancellor's office. There was a working group on that. Unfortunately, it was after the decision was made, but several of us got together and tried to help figure out how to not make that as confusing as we know it's going to be. And it is confusing now. We are getting calls from folks across campus saying, I thought I was a Promise student, and they, are you Board of Governor fee waiver, California College Promise, or SBCC Promise? So we're going to have to grapple with that for a couple of years. I think that's probably the single biggest challenge. I'm not concerned about the general public interest nor the dollar amounts available to sustain the promise, but it is going to be somewhat reactive to what the state of California does with respect to college access. Now, if in fact the state does find a solution, any of the numbers that are on the table or a new one that maybe isn't, to go back to 0 enrollment fee for California residents, we would still be doing the majority of the promise, because the majority of the SBCC promise is actually books and supplies. So more of it goes to books and supplies than goes to enrollment fees, because that is actually the larger cost for most students. So that will be there regardless, but what shape it takes depends a lot on what the state's next several decisions are. I hope that helps.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, John.
I remember at the last foundation meeting, you all were discussing requesting money from the college for operations. Is that still a request, or going to be a request?
We still do have that request, and it's still the same amount. It would be about 10% of total operating is what we're asking the district to consider. The 2 things behind that, and Dr. Beebe and I actually had a conversation just yesterday when I shared about the good news about the unrestricted funds that came in. The history of the foundation, and this is what, when I arrived 3 years ago, I really sat down with a full board and decided we needed to grapple with this, is that we had, for many years, not been sustainable. The funds raised were whatever was raised, whatever was spent, and the gap was filled with those sorts of reserve net unrestricted funds. The challenge with that is that you never know when those will come, how big they are, and we were spending as much as $800,000 of those funds in a single year at times, and so that draws down quickly. So the 2 reasons for the request are, 1, stabilization of multiple types of income, and the most stable budget is one that draws from more sources, because if something goes sideways or the college has a difficult year and can't do it, then you have other things to go to. The second is really more of the principle of the buy-in. We're fairly unusual in the state of California in not having any direct financial support from the district. I mean, we're a parallel partner nonprofit, but the vast majority of our peers, even the independent ones, some number of either the employees or the functions or just a general contribution is made. And so since we're unusual in that, I thought it was a good year to open the door, at least to talk about, would the district be in a position to do something, not a majority, but a significant minority, and that's where that 10% number came from. So yeah, my hope is that you'll still consider that, and my caution would be that unrestricted number is great, But at the rate that it was drawing down previously, I would not like us to go back to that. And I'm working with my board to make sure their commitment stays as strong, and my staff, to raise that full $2 million annual operating budget that we actually need every year.
And then, Dr. Beebe, is that in our budget that we're considering?
That is in our budget. Lindsay will talk about that.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Other questions?
Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that then brings us down to item 10.7, which is board goals. And so the board has a policy, Board Policy 2745, which is our board self-evaluation, and we went through that process. On August 10th, the board had a retreat, and we met to discuss our board goals for 2018, 2019. Per our policy, we have till the end of August of each year to develop goals in consultation with our superintendent president. So what you have here is goals that were developed based on the information received from the board retreat on August 10th, 2018. Google Doc, which you guys actually all have a copy of that, and that was a working doc to gather some narratives, get some goals down that Trustee Abood shared with Trustee Miller and myself as per our agreement on the 10th. In addition to that, you'll see some other sources that were used to develop the goals, including our SBCC mission, vision, core principles, a blueprint for great schools, which is sort of the governor and, Superintendent Troxon on our K-12s, and different other sources. Once the narrative was collected from the Google Doc, and there was a lot of stuff there, then I went through and sort of tried to condense them to sort of some big ideas and some big areas that we could focus on. I then sent over the narrative from the Google Doc along with some draft goals over to Dr. Beebe, and as per our policy, in consulting with him, this final draft before you is here. So what we'll do is, we don't want to limit discussion because this is important, and so what I'll do is I'll start with Student Trustee Farmer and then sort of go around, and then we can hear the board's thoughts. They do have to be developed by August, and so today is our last meeting in August, unless somebody wants to get together on a special meeting, which I would not like to, given that the first day of school is Monday, and Angie's desk will be bombarded with other things. But nonetheless, we are here, and we've got all evening. So Student Trustee Farmer, we'll start with you.
Just want to make sure, you included my goals, right, at the meeting?
In terms of wanting the board to be more involved and getting more feedback and stuff from the community?
Yeah, like forums and you
Yes,
included
so-
the suggestions I had at the meeting?
So where I feel, just Student Trustee Farmer, that is captured is under goal number 7, where it says accreditation and board education. And it says remain informed of and involved in the continuous process of accreditation and institutional improvement with the focus on standard 4 leadership and governance.
Okay.
And basically that then tells us what our governing role is and what we are to do in terms of interfacing with our community, in terms of working with the college, and really staying within that standard 4 to work with Dr. Beebe, and then for him to open up those venues for us to do just that.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'd just like to see a little bit more transparency and clarity. Sometimes using big words and standards, really just explaining more what that is. If I could see more of that on the document, that would be great.
Does anybody have any thoughts to Trustee Farmer's comment, Trustee Croninger?
I was going to make a similar comment in that I think on our first draft, we had board communications as a element, and in the final draft, I'm thinking that I would prefer it return. It doesn't have to be as long as in the Google Doc, but a reference, what we had in the Google Doc is over the next year, the board will develop a robust communication program in order to better connect with stakeholders both internally and at the college externally. This will be in order to solicit input for our decisions as well as inform the public about our thought process behind decisions. Developing a more robust communication system is really kind of, to me, putting it in our goal in that language helps everyone see what the goal is. Nobody likes looking up Standard 4.
Okay. Any other thoughts related to follow up with student trustee Farmer and trustee Croninger? Yes, trustee
Yeah, I mean,
Abboud.
I support that. Like, I developed that goal, and that's why I'm not seeing it reflected on here. And so I don't think anybody, including myself, can read number 7 and assume that's what it means. Like, nobody could. You can infer a million different things, but I don't know if that's clearly inferred from that goal.
Any other thoughts on that specific comment that started with student trustee Farmer? Yes, trustee Nielsen.
I'm happy with what was just discussed. I think that was good. Thank
Okay.
you, Crystal.
So, in consultation with superintendent presidents, so my thinking on this is, to your point, student trustee Farmer, the details that don't seem to be on there, and so this is a very high-level view of a board goal, a very high-level policy. And so, in thinking of the Office of Communication that is headed up by Luz Reyes-Martin and her team, and the different levels of communication that have gone out, in my head, I kind of think of it as stages. I'm certainly don't agree or disagree that having a standalone of just having specific board communication. However, the board, while we are connected to the community in our own personal different ventures and things that we do, as a body, we can't act or have any power outside this body. So everything that we would do would have to go through Dr. Beebe and through the Office of Communications. And so if you feel, Dr. Beebe, that at this point they can sort of absorb or add one more this item to us, because I know that while we don't know the full depth, I know that it is a very robust team that is doing a lot of different things in the community. And so are you ready to add that layer this year to create that robust program? Because we're not creating anything. This is all going to fall back on the Office of Communications under Luz Reyes-Martin.
Well, just a quick comment on this. You all take actions on items in the agenda that could be reported out. We have systems now in place that could be leveraged. We have the bridge, we have other communication means that we could be using. So I'm not sure that it'd be actually, and Luz is here, be actually recreating, something completely separate, but it could be integrated into some of the mechanisms that we already have. Yeah, Luz, you want to talk about this? If you don't mind.
Yeah, please, yes.
Sure, good evening. Good evening, Board President Gallardo and trustees. I think Dr. Beebe's right. I think we have a lot of tools already in place that we could leverage. I was unfortunately not at the board retreat to hear what the comments were about increased or more robust communications from the board, but I'd be happy to work with Dr. Beebe and the board to see what we may be able to do. I think there's a lot of existing opportunity to get some board messaging out, especially in your individual districts. So I'd be happy to work with the board on that.
Does that get at what you guys were? No?
What that is, so student trustee Farmer.
Just for clarity purposes and for students to understand that may be watching this. So are you basically saying that we have a certain language that we need to adhere to on the board, and that can be interpreted in different ways through other channels for people to get the information? I'm not understanding what you're saying.
No, that if we were going to, basically the board, we can't create anything. I mean, we only do and act at the table. And so if we wanted to have venues open to us in the community or have forums available on campus or all of that stuff, everything would funnel through Dr. Beebe and then back to Luz. And so the question was, does the institution have the capacity to support us in that this coming year? And so it seems like Luz is thinking that there are already some things in place that as the communication plan continues to be built, that we can plug into what already exists, and then it's going to continue obviously to evolve because everybody keeps improving.
Well, then, so once we work with them, then we can change the document. Once we've done
No.
that, we can change the wording on the document.
No, we're going to do that right now.
Oh,
So
okay.
if folks have any verbiage that would sort of add to that, or we add an eighth one, that's what the discussion is right now. Yes, Trustee Carninger.
Well, as far as language, I would suggest maybe we take it from the Google Doc, the original first sentence, which may be in front of everyone on the board, but probably not in front of the public. So I'll give it again. Over the next year, the board will develop a robust communication program in order to better connect with stakeholders, both internally at the college and externally. So I think somebody drafted that. Maybe it
Yeah,
was
Trustee
Jonathan.
Abud. Mhm. So that first sentence, so
And it would be a category, I think, called communication rather than putting it under 7, maybe it's 8.
So I just heard that we wouldn't be necessarily developing anything, but we would be plugging in or integrating to something the college already has.
I thought that meant that we have the email lists and the infrastructure if we send out additional information. Let me give an example. I sent to Dr. Beebe a newsletter that I happened to, well, it wasn't, I don't know, it was an email I happened to get from West Hollywood that basically described in very plain and simple language what the board was going to discuss in their next meeting. And these were substantive issues that the community might be interested in. So that just went out as an email with a simple listing and so forth. And I'm not sure if it all falls on Luz. Certainly Luz has to edit us. But we ourselves could take a shot at the first draft of such a thing because, you know, what's on the agenda is really what's being reflected. And then Luz could make it sound better, and out it could go.
Thoughts? Yes, Trustee Miller.
I think we do need another category called, I don't know, board communications or communications, but I don't think it fits under 7, so I do think we need a separate item, number 8. And I'm just wondering if we use that first sentence, but we take in mind what you have stated, and that is that perhaps we change it to, over the next year, the board will support a robust communication program, as opposed to develop one. It's a broader term than develop, but just a suggestion.
I mean, I feel like we as a board need to develop our own way of communicating with the public because, you know, 2 years ago, we started doing those forums. That was something the board developed the idea for. So I think we have a responsibility as elected officials to develop a way we will communicate better with the people who vote for us.
So I think that is a good point, but I think once we are here in a nonpartisan elected role, the only thing that we can do in terms of us putting an SBCC table out in front of us, anything, is to go through Dr. Beebe. And so and I'm not saying this because I agree or disagree, but I am extremely mindful, and I really meant what I said at the board meeting, that our decisions flow down from Dr. Beebe all the way to an hourly person at a front desk serving our students. And so when we give a direction that sends the institution this way and that way and that way, the person steering it gets tired. And this is a really big institution, and there's a reason why our CEO, superintendent, presidents are turning at 3 years, and we get that. And so when I was thinking about this and reading the literature of just, I work for District 2, so being part of the leadership teams and looking at change and how employees and fatigue and different things like that, I was mindful in thinking of what is realistic that would be something that folks can identify. Granted, it's not the huge scope of something, but that they can do, and people are not getting tired, and they're focused on a narrow path, and they're going to stay on the path. And so when I hear Lou saying that there are things that are in place, because these goals need to develop in consultation with our superintendent president. So if he invites Luz to the podium and Luz says there's something in place, then we can fit into that. I don't disagree that we could add an eighth one. I do like the support, because then that just leaves open to what's there, we'll support that. But yes.
So I have a question. I thought Trustee Aboud made a good point. If perhaps you could give us some examples of what this program would look like, or some items that would be in the program that we would develop.
I wrote on here, quarterly newsletter, which is something the board has discussed in the past, regular forums, which is something we've discussed in the past, and attendance of college and community events, which is also something we've discussed in the past.
You're talking about attendance by board
By
members
us, going out.
Okay.
And I think having a program where we have a developed way of going to events, it's something we've talked about and never done.
And
it's
who would actually prepare the quarterly newsletter?
I mean, in the past, we've gotten it from the superintendent's office, under both presidents that I've worked with. They've sent us a list of things to go to.
And that then gets delegated to a staff member.
I understand.
Yes, Trustee Croninger.
I'm thinking that what we're doing as the bridge is, in effect, a quarterly newsletter for the college. And maybe if there is a piece of it that the board could add, or the president of the board could add a short piece in it, then you're really addressing that part of it. What I was getting at was trying to have a more digestible and widely circulated version of what the board will be discussing when we're discussing the more interesting issues. The day-to-day business, I don't think anybody wants to come to, but if we have a substantive issue, then improving the communication to everyone that they might want to come listen, or listen to the tape, or make a comment I like. So.
Any other thoughts?
Well,
Yes, Trustee Nielsen.
I like what Lou said. We have vehicles that we could make more use of, where if we did a regular article or had a regular release in the bridge, we could that's another communications option. I don't know, it seems to me that if anybody wants to make, is interested in trying to work towards real substantive change that would mean we have to change policies, then they need to come to the board. And those channels are there pretty well clearly defined, and they can do so, and they have. We've had some pretty good attendance at some of our meetings. So I think the goal, we should try to keep it simple so that it's a little more achievable. We need to take better advantage of the tools we have at our disposal, and use any new ones we happen to think up, so long as they're appropriate. I don't know, it seems like when we're trying to communicate better, what we're trying to do is looking for more input. In other words, we want to know what you guys out there want so that we can really think about that. And one easy way to do it is the Board of Trustees could open an office on campus and have everybody come in and talk to us, but that's really been tried in the past and not a really good idea, because then we would get too involved in things that are not ours to be involved in. And so the more information we put out in the more different forms, to the public as well as to the faculty and the students, which is the reason we're really here, the more we communicate with them, the more we're going to get back. So that's the avenue we need to take, is to put out more communications, then we'll get more response. So I'm really hesitant to try to invent new things. I'm not against it, but I am really for using what the vehicles we already have that we're not taking advantage of to the degree that we could. Now, who's going to do that? Who's going to draft that stuff? Who's going to put it in? Well, it's got to go through, somebody's going to have to do it. That means the secretary and Angie. It's going to get, or maybe Angie needs an assistant. That's how it's going to get done. And because there has to be some kind of controls and standards, and that's the secretary's job. So that's kind of what I have to say on it. I think, you know, you can get too down, you get to the point where in discussing some of this stuff that you can't really nail it down without overemphasizing one thing over another. We just have to take, let's make it, I'm for making it a goal to develop, you know, a release, like at least a monthly release to every one of those magazines or vehicles that we have, and to make sure that we do it.
Yes, Trustee Huston.
I'm wondering if the problem here is that we have tried to boil down our goals to a bare minimum, and that what we're wanting to have included isn't in there. And I'm wondering also whether trying to write a set of goals by committee is a good idea. And that maybe one option is to send it back to the three of you to expand where expansion is required, and bring it back to us in the first part of September. I don't know that there's anything written on any celestial tablets that says we must have it at the end of August.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, does that make sense to you?
That's what I would like to do.
So if I could respond, I'll get to you soon, Trustee Farmer. School starts on Monday. And
Right.
so,
So, but I'm not making an argument for
No.
another meeting in August.
no, I'm not think we're having another meeting. But, well, if I'm being mindful of Dr. Beebe, I work for a school district. And so I think that I live the day-to-day of educational reform and do this, and, you know, just so many different folks wanting to improve and do it. The team you're trying to steer, the person steering it gets tired. And people get tired, and you can think of all these wonderful ideas, and as much as you love them, you will end up going back to your hub, shut your door, work with your department, your team. And so I don't disagree that we could add an eighth one and then add a specific call out to education. But as you're thinking about this, I would highly encourage us to really be mindful of that. Our educational system has become really complex, and there are a lot of things that the governor brings down, the state boards of education bring down. At the end of the day, regardless of the millions of things that are out there, that faculty is focused on what do I need to do for that student? And whether it's in a board goal or it's the best program and training Dr. Beebe sent them to, they're going to do what they know is right to do for that student. And so if Dr. Beebe is okay with this, knowing that we have different board policies that cover different things, then to me, I'm okay with it, because this institution's not going to improve in all the different things we need overnight, nor is it possible. You can't do it all and do it well. It's just impossible. And so when I look at this, the Accreditation Board of Education, well, you guys, we can't go out there unless you're educated on it. This institution was once on warning. We had to go through the accreditation and all of that. So unless we are educated on what our role is in leadership and governance, we can't go out there with the next idea thing that we need. And so for me, it doesn't hurt to spend a year on leadership and governance and really looking at what our role is in that. And then maybe it's board education, DAS communication, so remain informed and involved with the continuous process accreditation and institution with a focus on leadership governance, and support efforts underway with the Office of Communication where trustees can fully apply their leadership and governance. Something like that, I think,
I
is
don't disagree
appropriate.
with you. I'm just saying, I just got this document, and I know it was on Google Docs, but I didn't know to look there. So what we have is a process of integration, and I'm not sure that this is the right place to do the integration. I'm perfectly content with something that the three of you come back to us with as a final document. And I know as well as anybody that each of us will interpret each of these goals a little differently, and I'm not sure that that's harmful. I think that's okay. So my only point is, how do we get a document that we can all say yes to?
Trustee Nielsen.
Yeah, there's a way to do that, Peter. There's a real way to do that. It's a changing world. We all want to agree on the verbiage and what little things left out and what little thing we think every one of us might think needs to be added. But we have something, okay? We can revisit goals at any time during the year. We can look at any board meeting. We could put on the agenda to evaluate a goal or to look at it or to revise something. And so right now, if somebody were to make a motion, and I'm, so to speak, doing that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve these goals, and so that we've got something to work toward, and then we can revisit items or the points on the goals. And in fact, one of the goals I'd like to see isn't even on here. So, but having no goals, in my opinion, is not an option. It's like not planning is planning to fail. So we have something to shoot for here. Even if we all disagree in minor ways about different points, at least we have something here to work towards, and I think we're unified in making progress. So that's my motion. Let's adopt it.
Okay, it's been moved to adopt the 2018-2019 board goals. Is there a second?
I'd like to suggest that we already have goals. We have last year's goals. And until we replace them, they are our goals. So it isn't the case that we're goalless. I'm just saying, let's work at getting a clean copy. Let's do it in a reasonable way and postpone the actual crafting of this thing until next time.
Okay, so I'll bring you guys back to our board policy that this needs to be developed in consultation with our superintendent president. And if we're delegating all authority for him to lead the institution, and school starts on Monday, all 100% delegation authority should be on the institution. And the first week of school is not usually when board members are carving out 2-3 hours of the superintendent's time. And I will do it if that is what the board wants, but that is not what I would ever ask of the superintendent president or the staff on the first week of school. That is not student-centered. I would never ask a faculty to get an email from a VP because Dr. Beebe needs feedback on something that the board would like to do. Yes, student trustee Farmer.
I believe President Beebe just got almost a $50,000 raise, so he can do what he's paid to do.
Yes.
So our policy says developed, not passed by the end of August. So there's wiggle room to get it done by then. And usually start of school is way before August 27th. It's usually like right now or a week before. And I just don't see the correlation between when we pass this and the start of school being that relevant, because this is one of the few things we actually do as a board. This and the budget and the evaluation of the superintendent are like our three big things we do. I want something that we can all agree to, and I'm going to vote no on this if we vote on it today. So I'd like to vote to postpone this until the motion to postpone this until the next meeting.
Dr. Beebe?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments here. First of all, I like the idea of not trying to pass this today. We can work on this next week and get together with a smaller group. I'm not tired. I'm not tired. I'm refreshed. I'm ready to go. So don't let that be an inhibitor in terms of moving this forward. I think we can. I like the idea of making sure that we're all comfortable with the goals and that we've had a chance to talk about them in a little bit different way. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
So I made a motion. I think Crystal seconded it.
Okay, it's been motioned by trustee Aboud to postpone the approval of the goals and seconded by student trustee Farmer. Any discussion? Yes, trustee.
Would that involve the either the formation of a subset of this board so that we can integrate these two documents? Or would it mean a continuation of the threesome that was established before?
I think that we can vote to postpone, and then we can discuss on the process going forward,
Okay,
and you guys can decide
Whatever.
how you want to go forward and on what. Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, Trustee Cronger?
Who would you're saying to create a subcommittee to decide on this?
well, we had one, and I'm not sure
Okay.
if they want to continue, but I'm happy with postponing that discussion until after we take a vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should. We're elected to do a job, so we
Absolutely.
should. Yeah.
Yes, Trustee Cronger?
I was just going to suggest that we also take this time to provide input to the folks who do the redrafting. So there may be other issues. We've been talking about one, but there may be other thoughts that people have. I have one.
We also, I mean, like, I think I always keep thinking of, my gosh, our lawyer, anyway, Craig, yeah. And he says, you know, boards are here to do the hard work. And so there's nothing wrong with adding that communication now and hashing it out now. I mean, this is the hard work of the board. You can only act when you're together, and we're together now. So if you guys felt like there were others that you were okay with, at least those could be like, check, we're good, and we can continue to go through that versus just postponing everything without having a discussion on the other 6. So that's an option too. Yes.
That might take 2 hours, and we have a lot of people being paid to be here in the public waiting to speak and a lot of other issues. Like, that's, I think, a terrible use of our time to do it at this table in a formal fashion with parliamentary procedure and calling. I think this needs to be done in committee.
Yes, Trustee Miller.
I agree. I also think there are more than just one that may need some tweaking and input from other board members, and I think that's best done outside of this meeting, and then coming back to the board. We can distribute whatever group or persons, board trustees who work on another draft can distribute it to everybody, and we can be ready to go at the next meeting, I think. So I support delaying it until the next meeting.
Okay, any other thoughts before we call for a vote? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Aye. Okay, motion carries. And thank you, Dr. Reeve. I don't think you're tired. Your team looks fabulous. I just don't want anybody to feel like great. So anyway, but you guys keep charging through, and that's amazing. So for next steps then to develop this, is there, Trustee Hassan, I sense a desire to maybe want to participate.
I would volunteer, but mindful of the fact that there already is a committee. But I'm also mindful of the fact that you're starting school.
You know, where the Lord calls, the Lord provides. So I've been here for 5 years, and like Marcia says, where do you get your energy? I don't know. It's really, we've got technology, things happen, Google Docs, Drives. I was at Disneyland in line waiting for Pirates, reading Trustee Miller stuff. It's really up to whatever folks decide that they want to do. But if you'd like to, Trustee Haslan, I have no reservation with having you jump on board.
You know, I'd be happy to assist and work with Trustee Haslam on another draft.
Okay.
I'd like to continue, and I think we should have Student Trustee Farmer. Since she's not Brown acted, we can have her on.
Okay.
Is that true?
I don't know.
She doesn't vote, so.
No, but I mean,
She has an advisory vote, but she doesn't have a vote to change a policy or anything.
Yeah, we can't do a
No, that-
chain
that
serial.
part I understand.
Through her.
but I'm not sure whether the Brown Act would apply.
I can look into it.
Like, does the public have access to her Public Records Act requests?
Sure.
Like, that they would request her email to view all items related to this, all communication related to this?
I'll be glad to look into it.
Okay. Are you comfortable with that, Student Trustee Farmer?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So do you guys have a time frame by which this would loop back around?
When's our September meeting?
Our next September meeting, so we meet on the 2nd and the 4th. Thursday of the month.
That's second and fourth is the 13th. So we have until after Labor Day,
13th and 27th.
Yeah, I think we should be able to do that.
like 10 days.
Yeah?
Mhm.
Okay.
Maybe if we could have like a short 1-hour meeting on campus between the three of us, at 4 of us, just to do it in person and be clear at the end of it that that's what we are recommending as a subcommittee as a whole back to the board, and so that there can be some clarity there.
So then Peter or one of you then decide, and then you guys would then coordinate with Angie, and then Angie would coordinate a room in fall. Yeah, she'll figure out a space for you guys if she can. Okay. And how much time do you normally need to look at space and location and?
So you're talking about an hour or 2 hours?
Hour? Yeah.
An hour? Okay. Yeah, I can find you a room.
I would expand that. I mean, suddenly we get together and, we start talking
I'll
and we
expand
just sort of, we can, a couple of hours. Some of us are long-winded, Okay.
Energy. Okay, so everybody's good?
Yep.
Clear on next steps?
Can I-
Yes, Trustee Coninger?
In order to avoid any Brown Act complications, I just wanted to make 2 comments to the
Oh.
committee.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of them would be that I like the campus, some version of the campus safety that I think dropped out. And the other would be under fiscal. I would suggest adding in that last list that we support the foundation.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Would it be an idea to ask everybody, and I don't think this would be a violation of the Brown Act, to simply write down what you think ought to be in each of these major points? Or if you think that there needs to be an additional major point, point 8.
You know,
I concur.
I would just, my only suggestion would be that, the 72, literally the 72 hours broken up, spending time to go through those sources. There's things that go through all the policies. There's a lot of things that are already in policy. There's a lot of things that are already part of the mission. There's a lot of things so just take the time to look to see, are we setting goals that we already made a goal, that as of that result of that goal, we then created a policy. For example, we did, update the BP 7100 on faculty diversity under the purview of Dr. Mona Hassan. I mean, we got, for the first time, a presentation with benchmarks from all our faculty, our staff, of where that diversity lies. So to me, that was a perfect example of a policy being executed to the fullest extent. So as you're doing this, spend time looking through those policies and see what's already been codified in that policy, because it was a goal 2, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, so that we're not looping back on something that we already did. I mean, let's be really mindful and do our due diligence on this. And there's a lot of literature out there that is being cross-referenced. For example, that whole thing with the budget. Moving on to that new budget is not an easy feat. I spent the weekend with, Dr. Bradley over at the county ed office, and they are reading all the LCAPs for the district who transitioned into this similar funding model years ago. It's a major work in progress, and you've got intelligent, smart people doing this, but, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So something like that fiscal goal would be one that spent time looking through the chancellor's recommendations and what is going on with the funding formula. There's lots of videos that you can watch for hours on that will give you a big picture depth of the amount of work that is going to take for our business services to really hash this through. The sea of information is out there. There's a lot. So yeah. Okay. Any thoughts? Sounds good. So we have no reports. Actually, we're not even at reports. We're actually now at public comment. And so we have a speaker that wishes to address the board. And as usual, I will read our part that says, why do I feel like this changed?
No, it's on the agenda.
Oh, my gosh. See, you guys, that discussion got me all over. Okay. So members of the public have the opportunity to directly address the board on any item of interest to the public that is within the jurisdiction of this board, whether or not it is an item noticed on this agenda. A member of the public may also speak before or during the board's consideration of any item listed on this agenda. Generally, no action may be taken on any item not noticed for action on this agenda, but the board may receive input from the public. And so, having said that, I would like to invite Bill Pintard, who would like to address the board on SB Foresters National Championship.
Madam President, members of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Beebe, Jeff Green from the Foundation. My name is Bill Pintard. Attended Santa Barbara City College in 1967. My son Eric Pintard was a student athlete here back in the early 90s. I am the baseball coach and executive director of the Santa Barbara Foresters. Santa Barbara Foresters are a baseball club that started in Santa Barbara in 1957, disbanded, and was reincarnated in 1993. I'd also like to introduce the president of our board. We are a 501c, and that's Christina Songer, who's here with me as well. I just really wanted the board to know I want to pay a debt of gratitude to Santa Barbara City College. And also, I want to brag a little bit in a minute. But first of all, we had played for 20-some years at UCSB, and it became problematic that we continue to play out there. And so we were looking for a new place to play. And the most logical place, we were offered a free field in Ventura, but we're the Santa Barbara Foresters, we're not the Ventura Foresters. We were offered another place in Goleta, but we're the Santa Barbara Foresters. And Pershing Park has tremendous history of baseball. I don't know if you know, but Babe Ruth did a barnstorming tour at Pershing Park in the late 20s. And there was a ball field there, and there was a stadium there. So we decided to try to move. Well, that entailed a collaborative effort by the City of Santa Barbara, City Parks and Recreation, and about 7 subchapters. An effort by Santa Barbara City College and the Santa Barbara Foresters. And we had a lot of work to do to be able to get approvals and guidelines and everything set up. And we did that last year. Last year was our first year, not this past summer, the summer before. We managed to get it. Our attendance was okay. Our attendance was pretty good. This past year, we went down there again. We repeated our first year. We went down there, and our attendance and the use of the park and the use of the field was off the charts. It exceeded anything we had done in 20-some years at UCSB. So I would like you to know that the people, Dr. Beebe, Rocco Constantini, Lindsay Moss, Jesse Felix, Rob Morales, worked with the city and with us to bring this to fruition. And it's been an outstanding thing. We have made some improvements. We have worked with Jeff Walker at Santa Barbara City College. We have made some improvements to the field because, as you know, Santa Barbara City College is in charge of the infield. The city of Santa Barbara is in charge of the outfield. Part of the outfield is owned by the old Spanish days. Yeah. You're getting a headache over there by hearing this? Well, it was a headache trying to get it all together. But anyway, we did get it together. And this past year, the Santa Barbara Foresters, 2 weeks ago, we won the National Baseball Congress World Series Championship. This NBC has been in existence for 84 years. It is very historical. It's the first tournament that was a continuous tournament in athletics, in amateur athletics, in America. It was integrated 12 years before Major League Baseball was, It's a very part of Americana, and we just set the record for the most championships. I thank you for helping us find a field. I thank you for your support, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, congratulations. And Cornelia, you'll speak on item 11.2 when it comes up? Yes. Okay. And that brings us to Renee Napoleon, who would like to address the board around BP 2715.
Actually, Rayanne Napoleon, Dr. Rayanne Napoleon.
Rayanne, thank you.
So, as an interested party here at Santa Barbara City College and part of this community, I am a tenured faculty member here at SBCC. I have interest in what happens at the board meetings, of course, like many of us, right? I am deeply concerned about what happened at the last board meeting, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about BP 2715. For those of you that aren't familiar with all of the acronyms and numbers that we all work with here at SBCC, this has to do with the Code of Ethics, Standard, and Practice. The reason why I'm here to give this public comment today was this particular BP board policy was made to silence and shut down student trustee Crystal Farmer. As soon as that it was mentioned and Crystal was silenced, the board meeting took recess, 5 minutes, and then after that apparently abruptly ended and no more information was given. Now I understand that all of that is well in line with the Brown Act, and that's great. But I have a couple concerns about this. The BP was referenced in an attempt to silence Crystal. Nowhere specific in this BP was referenced at that time to explain why Crystal wasn't able to speak. It was just repeatedly said that because of this. Since then, I've reviewed it carefully, and just for the record, I'm academic policies chair. I've been an academic senator for 5 years. I am a department chair, so I do have experience reviewing BPs and APs, and as a matter of fact, I've had my hand in crafting several of them. So I'm a little bit confused where in here it was referenced. I think the Board of Trustees owes it to the public, the faculty, the staff, administrators, students, and Crystal in particular, where in here supposedly Crystal was not in compliant with this BP. Furthermore, I'd like to highlight that the person silencing her at that time was not in compliance with the BP, specifically bullet point 3, keeping an open mind and listening to the others' ideas and points of view. Then the next one down, working with other board members in the spirit of harmony and cooperation and giving courtesy consideration to others' opinions. It's not an agendized item. Clearly, you guys aren't going to go over it today and things like that, but I do think at some time, what Crystal was pushing you all for during this whole discussion of goals and all of this stuff is exactly that. Open, direct, honest communication with the public so that people understand what is going on in this room. Allow your student trustee to have a voice at this table. She is a student leader. She was elected by her peers. She is incredibly intelligent. Allow her to speak. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you, Dr. Renee Napoleon. And that concludes our speakers. I think it was clear who all the speakers were. Marty did request that it was noted exactly who the speakers were at the last time. So were you guys all clear who Dr. Napoleon is on the campus? Any questions? No? And then we're clear with Bill Pintard. Okay. So we have no reports?
No reports.
Okay. Do the board members have any reports? Item 5.5. No reports from board members. Okay. Yes, Trustee Croninger.
I would just mention that some of us attended the kickoff this morning, and it was really excellent. Really appreciated the opportunity to hear Dr. Beebe and our guest speaker as well on the principles really of trying to talk to each other rather than shouting at each other, and a culture of Jonathan, what was the term?
I wasn't there the whole time.
Oh, you didn't hear that part. Peter, do you remember the term? This was new to me. The speaker had the
Well, calling people
call in and call out, I believe was the terminology. You call out people, and that is a frequent phenomenon in social media in kind of a negative way, which alienates people from each other. Call in were techniques to facilitate talking to each other about what the issues were. And I think developing that call-in culture is something that's tremendously important for us.
Thank you, Trustee Carnander. Yes, Trustee Abud.
Yeah, so I went to the Isla Vista Safe Committee today, and I was going both as me as trustee and me as general manager for Community Service District. And we were discussing a new resource in Isla Vista that's somewhat geared towards our students by the Community Services District, which is a Survivor Resource Center. So SBCC doesn't provide, sexual assault resources in Isla Vista because we're not physically there. And so our students who live there have a hard time accessing such resources. So the Community Services District is putting together a program with the STESA, formerly Rape Crisis Center, to particularly serve our students. I mean, of course, it's open to others, but it was identified as, City College students in Isla Vista. If something happens, they'd have to travel downtown. That's not an easy thing to do after trauma. So we're putting together a service like that in Isla Vista. And we're also hiring a sexual assault investigator officer with the UCPD. That's for, though, only Isla Vista, so including non-UCSB students to help investigate those crimes better.
Student Trustee Farmer.
So I spent my week, I got countless amounts of emails from faculty and staff that had watched the board meeting that happened on August 9th, Thursday. So I spent these past 2 weeks meeting with people, reliving that traumatic experience over and over again. And I would just like to say the continuing silence of a Black student after we just got through with watching an emoji presentation on how bad Black students are doing on this campus, how oppressed and traumatized they are, and then to go ahead and silence a student trustee after that by the board president was unacceptable. The continuous harassment and the continuous allegations that have been made against me are unacceptable, and it just adds to the discrimination and the anti-Blackness rhetoric that goes on in this campus. What also adds to that is you sit here and you have a professor that gives a presentation on how you treated me, and there was silence, and no one clapped, and no one acknowledged the words that she said. Adds to the discrimination, the continuous silencing of Black students and a Black woman that sits on this board and has worked extremely hard to do the amount of work I do and to stand up for the voices that don't feel like they be heard. I hope this is a call to the board to really start standing up, to really start understanding that there is a marginalized, underrepresented group on campus that feel isolated. So students are leaving time and time after again. I see my friends leaving this place because they don't feel welcome, returning to their homes because they don't feel welcomed. They see me getting beat up and bullied constantly at this place, and they don't want to be involved. They don't want to speak. It's a sad thing to witness. I continue to put myself up on the chopping block because I am a strong Black woman, and nothing is going to stop me from doing what I have to do for myself. But yes, I looked up the code of ethics, and Veronica, what you did to me was against the code of ethics.
Thank you, Student Trustee Farmer. Any other reports from the board? Okay, so that moves us to human resources, or actually development of the consent agenda. So we have item 6.1, call for removal of any items from the consent agenda, or from the agenda. No items to remove? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt items 7.1 through well, we want to discuss the board goals, so through 9.7.
You're looking for a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve items 7.1, so that's human resources, all the way through educational programs, all the way through business services, which takes us to item 9.7.
So moved.
Okay, it has been moved by trustee Croninger to adopt the consent agenda. Is second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded by trustee Nielsen. All in favor? Or sorry, is there a discussion?
Aye.
No discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Oh, I thought you were saying.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. That takes us to item 10.1, location change of the regular board meeting. And so we've had a number of comments on the setting in this boardroom and feeling like this is a little bit more conducive to carry out the duties of the board. And so there is an action item here before us to have all board meetings going forward here in this room, so through December 13th in A211.
Comment.
Yes, Dr. Beebe.
Just to add to this recommendation, one of the issues that we've run into at the other venue relates to technology. We have all of the cameras set up here, we have the technology here to be able to stream this live, as opposed to over there, we record it, and then we have to caption it, and it's basically a week delay. Here, it goes out live stream, and it's captioned real time, so there's no delay. And for the convenience in terms of communications, as we were talking about before, it's more immediate. So I think it's a big advantage to have it in this room in terms of transparency.
Okay, so we'll ask for a motion, and then we'll open up for discussion for the board, if you guys want to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
I move approval of item 10.1.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Heslin and seconded by trustee Miller to approve the location change of the regular board meetings. Is there any discussion? Yes, trustee Nielsen.
Aside from the issues that Dr. Beebe brought up, there are meeting rooms that are just plain too small when we have interested parties come in, and that particular room has diverse entries and exits, and it's not conducive for us to do business in. We use other smaller rooms, but it's rare that the room becomes crowded. So whenever things on the agenda that's going to invite outside speakers, that's a small room is just plain not appropriate. And for those reasons, in addition to what Dr. Beebe brought up, I don't care if it's here or we do it at the theater on the other side of the campus or what we do at the Gavin, but that's just too small of a venue.
Trustee Croninger?
Well, I was just going to say that I would be disappointed in the sense that the move there was an attempt to go back to the style of the study session that we had historically, where there was a more informal atmosphere and a better exchange from folks who were visiting the board meeting, and we were studying substantive issues. So I think we lose that in this room easily, quickly. Being up on the podium like this is not particularly friendly, and I don't like it. I prefer sitting at the same level as everyone else and around the same table, even for formal business. So I would wish we could find another room. I know that's a scheduling problem, and I respect that. The BC one is really the one that is both bigger and I thought might have the technology, but those are my thoughts.
Yes, trustee Wood.
Yeah, I share those sentiments, but at the same time, I just think that the other room is just not sufficient. It's crowded and it's confusing, to be honest, which meeting or which day we're going to which room. So I think this room is set up for the meetings for now, and maybe we can look into another one, but I think this is the best decision for the rest of the year.
All right.
Trustee Nielsen?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan. I think the idea of having a study session type meeting is great, but the study session, it wasn't a study session. It was just another board meeting. And when it's just a study session where we're going to study issues and maybe make a necessary vote on something that's time-sensitive, but it turned into more than that in the wrong facility. And, you know, with the audience, the number of people there, it was too small, regardless of the other issues. So I like the idea of having a study session meeting, but we didn't call it a study session. It was just another board meeting.
Okay.
That's
Student trustee Farmer?
I guess I kind of agree with what Marsha was saying. I do believe that intimate setting of that meeting sometimes can create more comfortability for people to want to come and express themselves in that setting. Sometimes this can kind of set us up on a hierarchy, and it separates us from the public. So I do think having that balance of both is good.
Yes, trustee Haslam.
Here's the problem. When we had study sessions, we limited the study session membership to 3 of us. And thereby we...
No, those are...
No.
No, that
I'm sorry.
wasn't the study session.
You're confusing the
Oh, I'm
committees with
yes,
the-
you're right.
yeah.
I take that all back. I'm just so confused. That's because, look at the time.
We had
At
more.
any rate, I continue to support the motion that we meet here because more people can fit in here.
Okay, any further discussion?
Oh, yeah, I have
Yes.
a question. I mean, I guess it's a question for Anthony or Angie or whoever is the expert on rooms on campus, but is there a room that both allows for us being on a lower level, but also like fits more people than the other room that we've been using? Like, is there a happy medium between the two anywhere? Does it exist?
We'd have to kind of do a survey of the different rooms, Jonathan, on that.
Okay.
And the schedule of classes has already been set and all of that for the...
You know, the other aspect of this whole thing is that, in terms of that other room, the presentations are really difficult. They're awkward, it's hard for people to see, it's hard for people to see the speakers, so it's really not the ideal room. So we can explore possibly some other rooms and bring them back as a recommendation.
That'd be really nice, just so that we know, it's just like, because we did make that decision last year that we wanted the more intimate settings to like meet a goal. And so I don't think we should abandon that, but I think we should stick with this place until we find our new place. But it would be good to have recommendations and options.
We can do that.
For like January, when
Yeah.
we vote again for time and place. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with both of you guys said. I don't know, I'm indifferent about both settings, even though that was more intimate, at least, because, you know, you're there, you're chairing the meeting. Even at the last meeting, you know, if you recall, there was, you know, an invitation for people, oh, is there anybody else? It was still a sense of like, even though we were all there, people still didn't give a slip. I had to invite them to say, come get a slip, and then tell them, oh, and you can come, even though you spoke, you can come back. And so even all those invitations, it was open, people still didn't. And I almost think like that, at least if you're there, it would be very clear, oh, the clerk of the board, you know, kind of give it to you. So I'm good, you know, either way. And I think I agree. In January, look at what's available. So, yes.
I've forgotten who made the motion, but maybe
It
we
was-
could amend it to add a request for looking into other options.
Well, I think the request was looking into the options for January,
For
not
January, no,
not
that's
through
what
December.
that's what I'm talking about.
But that's just, can we just tell you to do that and you can, yeah.
Sure.
That's, yeah.
I don't think that's...
Yeah, it doesn't require like an amendment. Yeah. Okay, so no, seeing as there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Oh, I didn't say aye. Okay, motion carries. Okay, so now we're at revision of board policies, and so we have a few here. Trustee Miller had given feedback, Trustee Haslam had given feedback, and I don't know that we have that feedback printed, but it was emailed. So Trustee Haslam had some thoughts on BP 2210, and that one's down there. Yes, okay. Peter, do you want me to just,
Well, I think
Talk about the proposed language?
the gist of my comment was that, as it is stated, it gives sort of an aura of absolute authority to the president of the board in terms of making appointments. Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah.
BP 2210, yeah.
Yeah. And that's at variance with actual practice. In actual practice, we make these decisions together. We make them in a consultative fashion. People say, yes, I'd like to do that, and no, I'd like not to do that. And that's how the process involves the development of consensus about who's who and where they're going to serve. So I would like us to develop language that reflects actuality rather than rely on these words.
Yeah, and at least I think the way we've carried out this role, at least in this body, what is it? I'm thinking, I'm like looking at the paragraph on the board chair handbook or the student trustee handbook. I mean, we act as a collective. So,
But I think what Peter's saying is this doesn't indicate that. It just means that, tomorrow the board president can just say, you are the representative to the foundation. And then that's it.
no, but I'm agreeing with Peter,
Oh,
saying that none of us have any power outside this body. None of us can do anything outside this body. So I think Peter's point is that, I mean, the board chair you facilitate the meeting, but there is no special privilege
Right.
other than we are a whole.
So one possible remedy might be to say, appoint, where was it? In consultation with the board, the president appoints. Something to that effect. Rather than leaving it as it is, which means that the president appoints. It says so. Appoint and provide for the assignment of all representatives to committees.
Right, and what we do is we nominate, we elect, and then people, folks, and we
We
sort of put it into place.
we discuss it, and the president, whoever it is, will find out who really wants to do what, and that's how those decisions are made.
So do you have any verbiage that you think you'd like to add, Peter? That you want to send over, and then that can come back?
Yeah, just what I said. And,
In consultation?
The-
Just add the word in consultation?
yeah, that'll work.
I will.
Who made this
Point in
draft, or
consultation.
where did this draft come from? It went through, so
It goes to BPAP.
So this came out of BPAP.
So I'll provide an alternative, which is in Board Policy 2305, Annual Organizational Meeting, which is when we do this anyways. There's already a line that says that we elect a representative to the County Committee on Education. We can just put other sentences that the board shall also elect
Other committee.
representatives to other things instead of putting as a president's duty, because it's not the president's duty.
Yeah, I agree.
I would just suggest that the practice has not been to elect. The practice has been to have this consultation that Peter is describing, where people say, I'm interested in something, and then if 3 people are interested in something where there's only one role, the president makes a choice. That's been the practice. And in the consultation language captures that to me and makes it a lot faster than going through a lot of nominations and seconds and elections and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's
It
true.
seems like an overcomplication.
Even if 3 people were interested, then there's an assessment of who really wants to do it and who really wants to do it. I mean, something like that works. I don't know, it sounds hokey, but it actually works.
So are you guys okay with doing that, but then dropping it into the board policy that Jonathan's referring to? Because it does make sense.
Jonathan's referring to making it election, which it has not been.
No, I'm
No.
saying, put what that was just said, maybe even change the one that I referred to, but putting it in organizational meeting annual instead of board president.
That's fine. I'm just trying not to over proceduralize it.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Just made that one up.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, so the verbiage would just be to add in consultation?
Yeah.
Okay.
In
So,
consultation with the rest of the board, the president makes the appointment.
Okay. You guys okay with that? Okay, so the next one is BP 2200, which is committees of the board.
And I think there's a sentence in that one that should be modified in order to take account of what we just did.
So Peter, your comment was related to paragraph 3, ad hoc. So you want to change that to, these ad hoc committees are established for the purpose of addressing a specific task or issue and are limited to their duration, and then we want to add, and comprised of no more than, or composed of no more than 3? You want to just add that?
Let me just see where I am here.
So it's BP 2200, and it's actually, well, you said in here that it was the 3rd paragraph, and then there's a heading there that says ad hoc committee.
2220.
2220.
2220.
I think this is the wrong. Yeah. No, I'm not sure where it is.
So the comments that you had sent over were, it said ad hoc committees that are composed slowly of less than a quorum. And so it's the 3rd paragraph, and 22,
Oh, I see what you mean, yes.
yeah?
Okay,
Okay.
standing, and that's correct. The standing committees are subject to the Brown Act.
Mm-hmm.
And ad hoc committees that are composed solely of, that's confusing to me, solely of less than a quorum. In the previous paragraph, we say 3. And so I think we should just be consistent.
So let's just change that to say composed of no more than 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So right after Angie, it says ad hoc board committees that are,
We've got it.
you got it, Angie?
Yep.
Okay, good. That's right, you get CC'd on everything because you are always working. Whenever we do something, you're working. That's right.
Good.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, so the next one is BP 2345.
Yeah, I think it's, so, okay, moving the translation thing is just all that's happening, right? But then, I don't think we should put a limit on public comment at special meetings just because if someone can only make that special meeting to give their comment, I don't want to silence anyone's voice.
Yeah, I think I had that same comment.
Yeah, and I think our check was legal, and so it was for special meetings, you comment on things noticed on the agenda. We can take that back to legal if you guys would like.
I don't know, just at my district, public comment, like anyone can speak in public comment that's not on the agenda, but we just don't take action on it.
Yeah. Yes, Trustee Carpenter.
I actually asked that question of our legal counsel, and he said it's correct. You only speak on the agenda,
Yeah, so,
on the agenda item. So,
The other
we can
lawyer-
ask again formally. I just happened to have an opportunity to say, is that correct? And he said yes.
Like, that's mandatory by the Brown Act?
does the board want Angie to follow up with council?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think there's some aspect of the logic there that I'm just not following. Because I think Jonathan's point is clear. I couldn't make that meeting, I couldn't make that meeting, but I can make that one. And if I have a public comment, I should be able to express myself.
I believe that's true.
Thank
We'll
you
follow
again,
up on it.
Angie.
We'll
Yeah,
check.
I had the same reaction, Peter, and that's why I asked the question. I was surprised.
We'll clarify with legal.
Okay, thank you again, Angie. Okay, and then Trustee Miller, you also had some feedback. Did we capture all of it? Because right now I'm only looking at Trustee Haslam's email, but I can pull up
I had
yours.
comments on 27, 35, 4,300, and 7,400, and they were all similar. Clarification.
Yes. And so,
I could explain them if you'd like.
yes, please, while I pull up your email.
On 2735, which relates to board member travel, the last paragraph starts out by saying, "District employees shall not travel to any state." And then there's a paragraph about to any state that has enacted a law that authorizes or requires discrimination against same-sex couples, so on and so forth, which I don't have a problem with the substance, but I just made the change to make it clear this refers to board members, so that it would say in the first sentence, with respect to participation in professional conferences and meetings related to their board responsibilities, board members shall not, and then continue with that same paragraph. So my other concern was that I think that last paragraph has to relate to business that we're undertaking.
Wow.
Otherwise, there seems to be an implication that regardless of our role, we can't travel to those states. And obviously, that wasn't the
Right.
intent.
So like while executing your duties as a trustee?
Exactly.
Okay. Can we note that? Okay.
And then I made this essentially the same change in 4300 and 7400 to use language that was specific to each of those. 4300 relates to field trips and excursions, and 7400 relates to travel and conferences by the administration.
Okay, so just to back up real quick, Trustee Miller. So Trustee Miller's comments on BP 2735 concludes our discussion for item 10.2. Is there any further discussion on those? No? Okay, so now we're at item 10.3, which brings us to revisions to Board Policies, Chapter 4, Academic Affairs, and that's where Trustee Miller is now giving us his comments on BP 4300.
Yes. You want me to add the specific?
Yeah.
My specific language on 4300 is that last paragraph would state, with respect to participation in field trips, conferences, meetings, or activities authorized by this policy, district employees and students shall not, and then continue with the same language.
Okay. Does the board have any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. Any further discussion on 10.3? Okay, seeing as there's no further discussion, that brings us to item 10.4, which is revision to Board Policies, Chapter 6, Business and Fiscal Services, and that is BP 6300, Fiscal Management. Any discussion? Yeah.
7400?
We're at, no, I apologize, Trustee Miller. Where is 7400? Oh, that goes all the way down. No, we're not there yet. We're first at Business Services. So we're at 6300 now. So now we're at item 10.4, Fiscal Management. Does anybody have any thoughts or discussion on that? No? Okay, so that'll come back for second reading. So that takes us to item 10.5, Revisions to Board Policy, Chapter 7, Human Resources. Now we have BP 7400. Trustee Miller?
Okay, and again, my language is similar. It would state, with respect to participation in conferences, meetings, or activities authorized by this policy, district employees shall not, and then continue with the paragraph.
Okay. Does the board have any comments on that? Okay, so that's been noted all by Angie. Thank you very much, which you were already on top of it because you got the emails and you were prepared. So that takes us now to item 10.6, ACCT Committee Trustee support. And so as we all get these wonderful emails of participation in these committees across the nation, and we are fortunate that we have trustee interest in that. And so basically this is for discussion, seeing as though anytime trustees want to step out of our roles here at the college, whether it be statewide or nationwide, there usually is a process of having a letter of support from the board. Is there any other thoughts, Dr. Beebe?
No, there's a couple different categories. I know Jonathan was interested in
Policy and advocacy.
Policy and advocacy, and I think there's some other ones too that may want to be shared.
Yeah, all my computer have died, but there's like a fiscal one, a diversity one, policy and advocacy, and maybe two more that oh, there they are. Governance.
The Chromebook, living up the MacBook. I guess you're going to have to look. Yes, so with Trustee Abud was Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Finance and Audit Committee, Governance and Bylaws Committee, Member Communications and Education Committee, Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. And should members of the board be interested in participating in any of these, it says apply now. So,
And the deadline is September 1st, so I'd be interested in applying to the policy one, and I'd love the board's support in a letter to do so.
any discussion, any thoughts?
This is to serve on a committee.
It's a national
Yep.
committee.
The Association of Community College Trustees, ACCT, which has really great resources, by the way, online. Yes.
What would make sense for members of this board, from your perspective, in terms of participation on these committees?
In terms of recommendations, or any of you, or my?
Yeah, well, either or. I mean, does it make sense for Santa Barbara City College to send a representative to one or more of these committees?
I think so. I mean, I think the policy one, because of Jonathan's interested in that, and I think that would be a valuable one. I also think with all the discussion and work that we've been talking about with diversity and equity, that would be a good one for somebody to attend, get involved with that, bring back some ideas and things that are a little bit different than the way we think about them here. You know, we get pretty insular in Santa Barbara. So those would be two areas that I think would be valuable.
Any other thoughts? Trustee Haslund, are you thinking, it just hit me that because this is going to go under budget, travel expenses, and we talked about like not going to San Francisco, and then now we're talking about going to Washington DC. Are you thinking of just the benefits and the pros
I'm
and?
expecting that President Beebe has taken that into account in making a recommendation. I mean, we've got to say it's either worth it or it's not worth it. And I'm not about to spend $1 if it's not worth it. But if you think it's worth it, then I would be interested in participating. I'm not sure that the diversity committee would be an appropriate one for me, but maybe it is. Let me think about it.
Any other thoughts? How, I mean, I don't know, you can get a pretty cheap flight to the East Coast, you know, if we went advance, because like Southwest flies there, and, you know, I guess the board's always mindful of travel, which is why we never fly out of Santa Barbara. Well, SFO to SBA is terrible anyway, or not terrible, but the fog. I mean, I take those considerations. I trust that you're mindful, and if something looks like it would be too much, that you guys would figure it out and weigh the pros and cons. So I fully support that.
And a lot of their meetings are on conference calls, too.
So hybrid
So
stuff?
there's like maybe one meeting a year you go to, and then that's when like you go lobby in DC for, like I did last year, which we were actually successful with some of our asks last year. Even with a Republican Congress, we got summer Pell Grants through, so.
And do they have scholarships too? I know Naleo.
They do.
Naleo offers them, you know, that they would cover, so then maybe if you get in the window of a scholarship, you know, that's something that you could do first before, you know, booking the flight, or, I don't know. What do you? Yeah. I don't know.
They do have scholarships.
Yeah, I
They do.
remember them saying, because not all colleges can afford to send folks, and so not wanting to exclude any trustee. So,
So let me look at what the other policy, the Public Policy Committee is of interest to me. But I'd like to see what sort of public policy they're really concerned about.
Right.
And whether that would make more sense for us. It's a broader kind of scope. But I'd like to have a chance to look at what each committee does.
This is the last chance we can do this today, because the applications are due on September 1. And
Well-
you need a board letter to apply.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm interested.
yes, trustee Carringer.
I was just going to suggest, if it's an application, which it obviously is, they don't necessarily accept us, we could approve two and give them options,
Yeah, we rank
along
the
with everyone
committees
else who
you want.
applies.
Yeah, you rank the committees you want, so you might get on, you might get appointed to not the one that was your first choice, but then maybe we can decide, yeah, like, that's something we still are interested in. Like the finance one, I don't know if we necessarily care as much, but diversity and policy are directly tied to our interests, I think.
So to Peter's kind of point, how much, because this is a national organization, so, and California is already pretty mighty and has, you know, their voice and their say, and we do things the California way. Is there, I guess to Peter's point, is there some region that, you know, things, you know, sort of, they benefit more than others? I mean, what is, I guess, the benefit to the California, you know, league?
Well,
Because we have the league. And so, and then we all filter up, so ACCT's over.
Right, this is national policy, for example, so it's a whole different perspective than just California.
So it gives us different thinking on what other folks are doing across the country.
Yeah, I think we ought to go with one, him.
Okay.
So I would move to offer a letter of support for Jonathan's application to work on the, which committee was it?
Public Policy and Advocacy Committee.
Yeah, Public Policy and Advocacy.
And it's just discussion, so we don't need action, but yes, I mean, we would love to take a motion that we have fully support, and there's a second, and I'll get to you, Trustee Farmer. Anybody second that support?
I'll second it.
Okay, good. Yes, Student Trustee Farmer.
I think at least one more trustee member should highly consider the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, especially in the times we are and the equity issues, the diversity issues we have on campus. I think that one more should commit to doing this work.
Any thoughts? Okay. And I don't take your silence as you don't want to do this, because in my collegial relationship with you guys, I know you're fully committed to diversity and to equity, and the many times that Peter and I spent on ed policies together and the conversations we had 5 years ago. But I do know that taking off to the East Coast or wherever, just setting up one more thing might be
Well,
time.
I think you put your finger on it. I'm very interested in working on equity and diversity, but I want to work on it here. I'm happy that they work on it there and seek to influence us, but I want us to own it and to work on it here.
Yes,
I do as well, but we're currently not doing it, and we're not doing it that well. So I think it is beneficial to go and see what other places are doing and bringing information back. And silence speaks volumes. So just adding that.
Okay, so we'll move forward with recommending trustee Aboud. Yeah?
Yeah, and thank you. And I'll rank diversity and policy as my top two.
Okay.
And see what they give me.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you, guys. And we already took care of 10.7, so thank you. So that brings us down to, finally, Ms. Lindsay Moss, 11.2, the 2018-19 adopted budget, and this is first public reading.
You also have a public comment.
Oh, yes, that's right. Cornelia, you have so patiently been waiting. Thank you. Cornelia Alzheimer is going to speak on item 11.2. Thank you, Angie, and welcome, Cornelia.
Thank you very much. Honorable members of the Board of Trustees, President Gallardos, Dr. Beebe, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my most favorite subject, budgets. No kidding, I truly love this stuff. And this year's adopted budget is especially exciting to read. Forget War and Peace or Lord of the Rings. No, just take this document here. These 17 pages. And look at page 2, second column, Unrestricted General Fund 2017-18, unaudited actuals. See the number in the third to last line, the 2,302,792. Please note the color. It is not red. The number does not have a parentheses around it. It is not a deficit. It is a surplus. Who would have thought this only a year ago? Do you remember the 5-year projections? We were bracing ourselves for a 3.3 million deficit, even with RAP and SERP and BRAC and whatever else we did. And now we are in the black. We came in $5.5 million ahead of our expectations. That is amazing. We are recovering ending fund balances instead of depleting them. We more than twice recovered last year's deficit. And let me point out who made this happen. It was for sure Lindsay Mass and her team. After all, she put the numbers together and she kept us updated and on track and she organized BRAC and you name it. But it was also our faculty, full-time and part-time, who made do with significantly fewer people than before. Teachers who took on additional students, who gave up on equipment requests, who saved on reader hours, copying, and supplies, counselors who squeezed in extra appointments to help guide our students. It was also our wonderful classified staff, Liz and her group, who with fewer people, just think rap, went over and above to pick up tons of extra work that otherwise would have been left undone. And the same is true for our classified managers and for our confidential employees, and not to forget our educational managers who worked hard to keep track on class fill rates, scheduling to demand, and other efficiency measures. And our college president, the leader of all our efforts, and not to forget you, the board, who supported and guided all this. Or, in one sentence, the people who work here make this happen. People are our greatest assets. Well, let's go back to my favorite document. We are still on page 2, but we move to the next column, the adopted budget for 2018-19, sometimes referred to as the final budget. Well, let me tell you, nothing is really ever final in budgeting. This time, I want you to stay on the very top, where it says revenues. Please compare the total revenues from columns 2 and 3. There's an increase of $8 million, and I want to tell you that we can actually expect another $1 million, my estimate, more in revenues, because there are 2 somewhat larger items that are still in the works in the Chancellor's office and are not counted in yet. These are additional funds for full-time faculty hiring and additional funds for part-time faculty. So I think we can safely conclude this new funding formula really worked out for us. Let's quickly summarize what is actually new in this new funding formula. It takes into consideration student income and student performance or success. It appears we did really well in these areas. And again, who are the ones who provide the extra support for students, who design the programs for our low-income students, who help our students
You have
to
1
be
minute.
successful? It is the people who work here. People are our greatest assets. When I cover budgets in my advanced accounting class, I always start with the following thought. A budget is not only a bunch of numbers printed on 17 pages. A budget is a communication tool. With these 17 pages, we communicate where our priorities are. Where and for what do we spend our limited resources? And when you make a decision about where and for what you spend these additional funds, may I please recommend that you keep in mind that people are our greatest assets. Please allow me to thank you for your attention and for your ongoing support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cornelia. And I think there was a board goal around that. So it'll come back to the board, but did you see the board goal under fiscal and budget? I think it captures what you just said. Okay, well, for those of you, I think you captured Cornelia, accounting, professor of accounting. Did you guys have any clarification on her role on campus?
I had a question on just her statement.
Well, we're not going to, you know what, why don't we wait for her presentation? But my comment to you guys was more, is it clear on what Cornelia's role is on campus?
Yes.
Yeah, we're good, okay. It was,
We just usually have questions, but okay.
well, we do have questions for presentations, but not for public comment. She just came up under public comment.
We do have questions for public.
Yeah, we have questions.
Yeah, it's always been a thing. I've asked questions in public comment before.
So
It's a quick question.
it's always a question for Cornelia, but we'll just, let's do this. Let's get, because it's 5:50, and let's get to Lindsay, and then if that question, because then Cornelia is part of this presentation too, and then so at that point, I think the discussion will probably come up.
Okay.
Because she'll be invited to come up as a resource for like all this, from having to speak in on the faculty association.
Good evening, President Gallardo, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Beebe. So, gosh, this is always so fun. I always get this last spot, at least this time I'm not going after someone who did some really exciting presentation on their sabbatical. So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna go over two different presentations. James Zavas, our controller, is going to talk about the new student-centered funding formula first. We have the Chancellor's Office presentation that we received last week at the ACWA Budget Workshop, condensed. The original one was much longer. So we want to talk about that first because it's really important to understand this new funding formula, and then I'll dive into the budget. We have a lot to go through, so we'll try to go fast. I know it's late, everyone's tired, but there's so many changes. This is really, really important to understand. And then to recap again, this is the first public forum, and the adopted budget does need to be approved at the next budget meeting because per ed code it has to be approved by September 15th each year. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to James.
And just Lindsay, so student trustee Farmer did email us that she had to leave early, and so, but as we know, this will be available on YouTube, so the students, even though student trustee Farmer left, they'll know that they can watch the presentation.
Could I? The thought occurs to me to take a 3-minute break prior to, because I don't want to rush you. I want to have whatever time you require because this is a brand new thing for us. So would a small break be feasible?
Yeah, is there a second to take a little 5-minute recess?
Yes.
I could use it.
It's moved and seconded by trustee Nielsen. Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye, okay, let's recess for 5 minutes.
Sorry, you got delayed a little longer.
Far away, so her recess didn't extend far from the podium.
So James will start off here.
All right.
Are you going to be speaking in 33 or 78 RPM?
Prefer. I was thinking maybe I'll split the difference and go for a 45.
That's a good answer, right?
Mathematician, that was quick.
Just a vinyl head. All right, so I'm going to use this and go through the student-centered funding formula. Lindsay did mention this, but I want to point it out again. This is based on the California Community College, on the Chancellor's Office's presentation we got at the budget forum last week. So some of this stuff on there is kind of them explaining where the governor was coming from and where the Chancellor's Office is coming from on where this funding formula came from. First slide is that, am I doing something? There we go. So why did they need to do this change? Why are they trying to enact this new funding formula? Most students who enter community college never really complete or get it with a degree or certificate. There's achievement gaps. I know we saw that this morning in the presentation on the guided pathways. They definitely made a good point at that with their graphics. And then also college enrollments have been declining across the state, so we have not been alone in seeing declines. 58 of the 72 districts. That kind of poses a risk for all the colleges when your only funding metric is FTES and your FTES are going down, then budgets start going down. And that, as we've seen, that doesn't necessarily mean costs go down. So the old formula, as we know, driven almost purely on FTES. There was always one or two other small factors in there, but basically it was all FTES. And then their principles for reforming the funding formula. So aligning with the state's priorities for education and training and encouraging progress toward the vision for success adopted by the Board of Governors. So they're trying to incentivize us to move in that direction. And then provide additional resources to groups of students that have faced barriers to success. So the new funding formula, I think, we've talked about it a couple times, but it's broken into a three-part base. The base allocation, which is really basically the old funding formula, has been reduced down to about 60% eventually. There is a three-year phase-in, so I'll show you that. But it's currently 70%. Supplemental education, which works with the low-income students, provides funding for those students, is 20% of the budget, and then the student success allocation, which counts all of our different outcomes and based on a number of success metrics. And we'll go through all of those different metrics. And that will eventually be at 20%, 20% of our funding. Currently, it is at 10%. So you can see it here, there is a three-year phase-in. The base allocation in 18-19 is going to be 70%. Supplemental allocation, or the low-income students allocation, that's at 20%. And then the student success allocation is at 10%. And then each year for the next 3 years, or 2 years after this year, that fades down. So we'll go to 65%, 20%, and 15%, and then eventually land on the 60-20-20 split. So the first component, the base allocation, like I said, this is basically our old funding formula. We get funded per FTES, and you can see the different rates here. The credit rate, if you take the 17-18 rate and add COLA and multiply that by about 70%, you get really darn close to that 3,727. There's a couple other factors in there, but that's what they're shooting for. You'll notice down on below the credit line, everything below that, the funding formula, the funding stays at the old level. So the new funding formula, all of these metrics really only apply to our credit side of the house, so all the credit students. They did call out the inmate and dual enrollment students because they want to continue incentivizing us to go after those students at the full funding rate, not at the reduced funding rates. All right, so the base allocation is broken down into, and again, this is pretty much all for the credit side of everything. It's broken down into Our base allocation based on the size of our college, I believe we're a mid-sized college, but that's anything above 10,000 FTES all the way up to, I think, 20,000 is where you go to a large. So that, we get funding based on that, and we also get the funding based on our centers. That part of it hasn't changed. We're still being funded the same way on that one. And then, let me see if there's anything here. The other thing that's big is that you'll see here the base equals the 3-year average of current year, prior year, and prior year plus one. Basically, that means we're getting funded on our FTES on an average rate, rather than what it had been in the past was our FTES, we would get funded on the higher of the current year or our prior year. So that's that stability we've talked about a lot, where if we decline, we get funded on our prior year. Now they're taking that and making it so that we get funded on the average of 3 years, which currently is very good for us because that smooths out that decline. We're still picking up that 3 years ago where we've declined and being able to include that in our average, which brings us up. They also allow us to continue to restore, which is good. So all the FTES we've declined over the past years, even if there's not enough growth dollars available, we're able to restore the dollars that we've lost from FTES declines. Let me see, I think, yes, I think I already mentioned the funding remains the same for the inmate and special admit students, which are dual enrollment students. All right, so now the second component, which is the supplemental allocation. The supplemental allocation is made up of students who receive the Pell Grant or the California Community College Promise Grant, BOG students. We do love to make that thing confusing with all the other promise programs. And then the AB 540 students. This is a duplicative count, which means if they fit into multiple categories, you get dollars for each category they fall in. And they literally just count up, you have X number of students, and they multiply that times $919. And then that's the funding level you get. So that's about $13.4 million for us, and which is a pretty good piece. And then, all right, so then student success allocation, this is where things get real fun. So they have 8 metrics that they've laid out that we will get funded based on. And I'll go back, I just skipped over the slide that has all the dollars on it, but I figured I should explain all the different metrics first, and then we'll go back to that. So we get funded for the number of associate degrees that we grant. And one thing I thought was interesting is it's the district that's granting the degree that gets the count the student. So if the student spent 3/4 of their time at one college and then comes to another college and that college finishes off the degree, it's the college that finishes that gets the count. Baccalaureate degrees, there were none anywhere around the state, so that actually didn't come into place, but if that comes up, that is another one. Associate degrees for transfer, again, this is the district that is counting the degree or conferring the degree. Credit certificates of 16 units or more. And then the 5th component would be completion of 9 or more CTE units. And then the 6th component is successful transfer to a 4-year university. 7th component is completion of transfer level mathematics and English courses within the first academic year. And then the last one is attainment of a regional living wage upon graduation. One thing I wanted to point out on all of these, these particular components are difficult for us to calculate right now. On our side, they're based on an MIS, the state's data system. They're based on special runs that the Chancellor's office has developed, and they have not yet shared all of that information with us. That was something that came up at the budget forum. They said that they would eventually get that out to us, hopefully in like October or so that our institutional research department can start looking at our data and figuring out how to make sure that that's all right and make sure that we're able to track that stuff going forward, because this does all become very important components of our funding formula. All right, so I said I'd come back to this part. This is the dollars per outcome essentially for the student success allocation. For us, the student success allocation is about $11.3 million overall. And then again, these are all duplicative, meaning so you start with your all students and you get funded for, we'll just take associate's degrees. You get funded for a student who gets an associate degree. If that student happens to also be a Promise or BOG student, you get an additional $333. And then if that student also happens to be a Pell student, you get an additional $500. So each one of those last two columns is in addition to that first column. So that was one that confused a lot of us at first. We're like, well, wait, you're double counting everybody, and especially when you look at the other supplemental allocation. So,
Just to add to this, and this really was a complicating factor for a lot of people to understand, we have a lot of students that get multiple associate degrees. We would get double, triple, whatever it is that the number of degrees that particular student would get. So that's where the duplicative part comes in.
mm-hmm. So you can see all the dollars amount, and again, these are just if you take it, they figure out your counts per your count of associate's degrees, your count of associate degrees for transfer, and then they just multiply it times that dollar amount, and then we get that funding. So, yes, Marcia?
I was just going to say, so, Anthony, you were saying that when a student gets more than one AA degree, we still get to count them again, and we get funding for that. Okay. And in effect, this means when you get to the numbers that we know how many of our disadvantaged students are actually getting the degrees and getting through.
Well, yeah, we would be.
Because,
for like the
because
Promise
we're
students,
talking
BOG.
the Promise students and the Pell students at least
Right.
in that
Yeah,
category.
we'll be tracking
Yes.
all of that very, very
Yeah.
carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is going to be one of the challenges. I know I've been spending a lot of time in Z's office looking at in institutional research. We've been talking about the different things we're going to need to start looking at. So it's a little bit more challenging to calculate because these numbers move all of the time, from year to year. It becomes a lot harder to project, a lot harder to guess. Before we would just say, we think our FTES is going to go here, and that would allow us to calculate where we thought our funding was going to be. Now that's only 60% of our funding. From there, now we have to project how many of our lower income students that we have, how many degrees we're going to confer, et cetera, to just try and get anywhere near accurate for our revenues.
Some of these are not in our control either, and so that's what makes it difficult. You look at the transfer to a four-year school, that depends on what the student's goals are. You look at attainment of a living wage in this area, that's a difficult one to figure out. So there are those factors as well.
Yeah, and they rely on, I believe, information on that living wage for from the Employment Development Department to get that information. That's another one that's challenging in our particular region because living wage is significantly higher than in other areas. But okay, is there any other questions on the funding formula? I know I went through it relatively quick, but
I just thought of another one. So associate degree granted is $1,320, and then if that person successfully transfers to a four-year university as well as getting the degree, we get both.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we get funded per outcome. So if that same student, we can get multiple different ways of getting funded for that one student.
This may be getting ahead of the story, but how does this translate into TLU allocation?
Well, this is the revenue side.
Right, I
TLU
understand
allocation
that.
being the
Mhm.
expenditure side.
But the revenue side is predicated on a set of assumptions that have to do with providing incentives for us to have increased numbers of people do all of these things. Does that incentive opportunity translate to faculty salaries? And maybe just leave the question there, because it may be,
Probably the best way to do it at this point.
Yeah.
Just because it's, there's not a direct correlation that way. I mean, there's a lot of other services that are involved besides just the TLU from the instructor.
Is your mic on?
So, yeah, we'll just let that one hang.
Okay, I'll just make a note of it.
Okay, anything else? All right, Lindsay, I think you're up.
This is better than I thought.
It's good.
It is good.
Good evening again. I'm putting my timer on, but I'm not sure why. I don't know how long this is going to take. Okay, so we all ready? Let's dive in. So we have a handful of things to cover, some new things that we haven't discussed in this format before because of the situation with the new funding formula. What we're not going to talk about tonight that I wanted to get out there is the projections. We did intend to have the projections for this board meeting. Really wish we could have, but with the extenuating circumstances with the new funding formula, it was just not realistic for us to get the budget done and the projections done for tonight. So we will have the projections done for the next board meeting, and I know we'll be doing a lot of projection work in the future with all this new information that we're getting on our revenues. Okay. So 2017-18, and thank you, Cornelia. She did a great job on my presentation earlier, so she like stole a lot of my thunder and talked about all the things I was going to talk about, but that's okay. We coordinated that, kind of. So 2017-18, it was really an unusual year. We had all of our initiatives with RAP and BRAC and educational program efficiency strategies we were working with to really work on that deficit that we had. So this right here is our 2017-18 budget versus actual. So be careful, that you're paying attention to what we're comparing where. It gets complicated because different parts of the presentation present different items for comparison. And with this information, we can talk about what were those differences. Why did we end up in the black, as Cornelia pointed out, and not in the red? And I have a handful of reasons and explanations, so bear with me, but we kind of have to do this, otherwise it doesn't make sense, right? So if we start off at the top here with the revenues, we have the state revenues. You see that came in quite a bit lower, 2.1 million. But the fun with our state and local revenues is that they're combined. So I'll explain that as we go. So on the 2.1, that's made up of about almost 2 million, 1.9 million of apportionment that came in lower than the budget, and then about $800,000 worth of state mandated one-time costs that came in lower than we were expecting, and then higher than budget was about $620,000 worth of EPA revenues. Now, that's offset in this local piece, this 2.8 million you're seeing where we have an increase. There's an offset on the apportionment piece of enrollment fees coming in higher than budget by about 500,000, and property taxes by about 1.5 million coming in higher. And about 1 in a million of that was from prior year property taxes. Those are things we're not able to predict when we get more money from a prior year. So, refresher on the total computational revenue. Our total computational revenue is the grand total amount we budget for our revenues. And that's comprised of the apportionment, property taxes, and our enrollment fee revenue. And when they differ, like property taxes come in higher or lower, the state apportionment we receive will offset that because the state's goal is to give us that grand total amount. So it makes it hard if one's lower, one's higher, we're gonna come in on track. And that's why you're seeing that overall, we're pretty close to on track. That's less than 1% off of our original budget for the revenue. So actually our revenue budget was pretty spot on, even though you see these large fluctuations. And that's kind of normal for us. Each year, it's like we don't quite get one bucket right because some of those things are hard to predict. Okay? So then going into the expense side, I promise this isn't as bad as it looks. We'll get through this here. So on the academic salaries, we did come in lower, about 1.9 million on academic salaries. There's a few reasons for that. One is that we do have a process where we budget for positions at the beginning of the year. So it's early, right? We start building our budget in May, June, and we don't predict who's going to retire, resign, leave for whatever reason. So those people are in the budget. And even though we all know there weren't a lot of people who did that throughout the year, one full-time faculty member is about $100,000 or more. So only a couple people retiring, or 3 or 4, can be quite a large savings to our budget. So that's a big piece of that one. We also have various things like faculty being on reassigned time or faculty being on reduced loads. All those things are in the budget and not removed throughout the year. Some other variances in that area is stipends did come in below the budget. And then the big piece here is we did see a decline compared to our budget of about $800,000 on the educational efficiency savings that we were working on. That's one of those ones we were talking about in the projections. Okay, so there's a big piece there. Okay, classified side, this $700,000. First off, we bring up RAP. Everyone remembers what RAP is, right? The Workforce Reduction Through Attrition Plan. That was a part of our strategic work on reducing our budget. So we are seeing that there, and we're seeing ongoing and one-time savings there. There are a lot of one-time savings. We had a brand new process this past year where instead of just replacing positions as people left, we held it. We had this process of submitting the requests and ranking it, and et cetera. And so all of those folks that weren't replaced immediately, those did add up as savings in our classified staff. And I do want to take a minute to kind of talk about something Cornelia was talking about, where this is really momentous. I mean, our staff and faculty really had a rough year last year because their colleagues left and they weren't replaced immediately. And they worked really hard to help us get to where we're getting here with the budget and getting it into the black. It was a really big deal. So please, I want to say a big thank you to our classified staff and managers who went through that, and they should really be acknowledged for the hard work, and it is really helping our budget here. One other minor one I just want to point out, because it's an initiative we've been working hard on, is that we did come in $100,000 lower on our hourly spend as well. So, okay, employee benefits. Savings of $1.3 million. If you just glance at this, it kind of doesn't make sense, because it's like, wait a minute, we can understand that the employee benefits are going to be a savings as well because there's savings in the salary area, but it's a lot higher than that, right? So there's another piece to that. We had an unusual one-time refund from STRS. It's really complicated, but I'm happy to explain it afterwards to anyone. But it's the first year we had this kind of an adjustment, and it was an adjustment for 3 years worth of employer and employee payments into STRS that they actually refunded us. So an unusual item, but did help with our budget. Let's see if there's anything else. We also had savings on like medical, payroll taxes, all of that because of the reduction in staffing. Okay, smaller areas here. This one was actually a little bit above budget. This is a little below budget, and that was primarily due to contracts and bank fees, so nothing too spectacular, but that's why that's lower, and these are pretty much flat. So on the transfers in and out, there's just a small difference here, and that was because the financial aid media campaign, we had budgeted more coming to us as the fiscal agent than we actually received that year. We'll get it in the next year. It just means they didn't spend all the money they'd planned on spending, so kind of minor. So again, now here we're getting down to that bottom line. We had budgeted, this is the adjusted budget here, 17-18. The original budget was a higher deficit, but our adjusted budget that we worked on throughout the year got us to 2.6, and we did end at this 2.3, and this isn't final, so I do really want to stress this. We're finalizing the books right now. The audit's ongoing. I don't expect this to change dramatically, but next time you see the numbers, when it doesn't tie to this to the penny, that's why, because this is unaudited and not final. Should be somewhere very close to this, but not final quite yet. Okay. The other piece I want to talk about here on this slide, if we can stay here for another second here, is I wanted to talk more about this concept here of this deficit and where we end the year. Some of us have been here a really long time, longer than I have, and they have this memory and feeling that we always have our budget and it says X with either a deficit or surplus, and we end with this huge surplus at the end of the year. And why does this happen? And why aren't we budgeting more accurately? So I pulled some historical data for us just to kind of understand the last 6 years. So our budget is about a $100 million budget. And when we're talking about a $2 million surplus, we're actually only talking about 2% of our budget being in surplus. So to keep that in mind, that I know it looks like really big dollars, but our budget is really large. So we're not, being 2% off on your variance year budget is not too bad. Now, last year, we did end with a deficit of $1 million, so about 1% of the budget. The year before, we ended with a $2.5 million negative budget at the end of the year. Sorry, not budget, the actuals. And the years before that were about $1 million, $2.5 million, and $2 million. So in the last 6 years, we've been within 1% to 2% overall with our ending balance. So that's almost a balanced budget. But with the last 2 years, us ending with that negative balance does show that we do still have this structural deficit issue, that with all the strategic initiatives, we were able to make a dent on that. So it's that one. I actually talked about all this already, so I'm just going to breeze through these. Okay. And James spoke about this as well. I just have a few things to add about our challenges that we experienced with building the budget and the new funding formula. So on this slide, I just want to point out our new revenues we're receiving, are included into all of these metrics now. And our funding for 18-19 that we've built into the budget is broken down in this way. So base allocation, 70%, that's about $57.4 million. Okay? The supplemental, the 20% here, that's $13.4 million. And the student success piece is $11.3 million. Okay? For our total of $82.1 million overall. So some history, we did receive the simulation from the Chancellor's Office in July of 2018 that said that Santa Barbara City College should be receiving $6.9 million in additional funding due to the new student-centered funding formula. We got that information and looked at the simulation sheet and modified it to include our accurate data, because the Chancellor's Office does the best they can, but if there's any errors, they won't catch that, our data is slightly different. So after we updated it, and specifically the items we updated were the associate degree transfer, that metric was off in the file. So we updated that to be accurate. And then the second piece that was off actually globally in the file overall is that it had a formula error and it didn't include growth. So we are growing in non-credit, and that's a pretty critical amount of revenue for us. So we corrected that as well. So after correcting these two pieces, the ADT and the non-credit growth, our updated simulation provided us with this $9.2 million additional funding due to the new funding formula. And this is the number that we've built into the 18-19 budget. Yeah.
I was just thinking that other colleges were probably correcting data too, and the sum total of all of that might be even, but it might not be even. Does that mean we'll have a recalculation because there was a basic cap on the total amount of money, and so they have to rejigger the amounts we get?
You're absolutely right. And you led me right into my next comment, that the next simulation we will receive from the Chancellor's Office is not until February of 2019. So when we were at the ACBO budget workshop last week learning about this, finally getting solid numbers from them, it was very disheartening to hear that, oh, by the way, we know all the districts have had to recalculate them, and we're not going to publish new information until February, until you're well beyond halfway through the year. So that's part of the reason why there's a lot of concern with the budget and comments that we really need to be conservative with allocating any new revenues to ongoing expenses. So, yeah, you're exactly right. And for the 2018-19, we are still in the process of negotiations with the Faculty Association and the CSEA, so we're not completed with that process yet. Okay. So we've spent like 8 months now in this new funding formula life, all on edge, at least I have been, us finance people, wondering how's this gonna work, what's our budget gonna look like, we really would like to build a budget, and it was really difficult because we didn't get the final information until just last week, and here we are trying to present it right now. So with this lack of ability to have a lot of time to figure out what to do with the new revenues, to continue to be conservative, to continue with negotiations, we had to make a decision of how to build this budget and finish it. And what we came up with was using a account number we've never used here, at least I wouldn't think we've ever used it in the history here, called appropriation for contingencies. And it's a part of the budget accounting manual that we follow. This line is an account line that we can put just a number, one big lump number into, that sets aside expenditures but doesn't detail out what they are. And the requirements of using that line is that when we go to use any of that money, we come to the board and it's board approved by 2/3 of the board. So we've decided to take $6.5 million from our budget on the expense side and allocate it to that line so we can have additional time to go through the work we need to do, make strategic decisions, and figure out how we're going to be utilizing those funds. Some of the primary areas we're going to be using it for is to finish with our negotiations and provide increases to our faculty and staff on salary. And then another piece that we're really focused on is trying to fill some of these vacant positions that we've incurred over the last year, where we really do need to, now at this point, work on hiring so we can, make sure our workload is covered. So, okay. So many new things. All right, we're going to get into the actual 18-19 budget numbers now. So, on the assumptions, we'll talk about the revenues first. I'm just going to highlight, I'm not going to walk through all of this. I'm going to highlight the items that are different from the tentative budget and, just point out anything that's real critical here. So on the credit and the non-credit enhanced, those FTES, this is nothing new from tentative budget. Those are remaining flat. The non-credit, non-enhanced, that's where we've been talking about having growth. And that $1.5 million growth in revenue, it was really critical. James pointed it out earlier, that we will be able to actually capture that growth money between the growth money provided to us and our restoration. So that was really important and good news to find out we will be able to actually get funding for that growth. There's no change here on non-resident international, still flat. The COLA of 2.71 that was provided to us back in the May revise, that hasn't changed, is included in the calculations of the new funding formula. So it's not called out anywhere different than that. It's included in that grand total number of 82 million. Okay, this new funding formula line here clarifies that the formula provides an additional 7.7. It's 7.7 plus 1.5 of growth, because the growth is in that new simulator. So if you're seeing 9.2 anywhere else, or when you're doing the math, it's 1.5 plus 7.7 gives you the 9.2 of the increase we have in revenues due to the new funding formula. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. How are we doing on time anyways? 6:30, okay. This is the same information as was provided in the tentative budget. So you can see we're not projecting any changes on our budget 18-19 on the credit, the non-credit enhanced, or the out-of-state and international. Our big change here is on the non-credit, non-enhanced. Very large percentage increase, but you have to come back and look at the numbers. It's because the numbers are quite small. So that's very exciting work being done by Dr. Moreno. We do have new information on FTS that are coming in, so these aren't looking quite as strong as we were hoping, but we haven't made it to census yet, so we'll see how that shakes out. This was also in here before, nothing new here. Okay. Ooh, I didn't mean to go that far. Here we go. So expenditure assumptions. It's really important to understand that that COLA increase of 2.71 is not included in the salaries of the expenditure side of the budget at this point in time, okay? We haven't built that in with all the ongoing negotiations. wouldn't be appropriate to build it in, and it would be unclear. So that's not built in right now. These other pieces are new here. We do have an increase in the hourly salary and benefits specific to School of Extended Learning, an increase of about $100,000. This isn't for the teaching or the instructors. This is hourly, like lab tech assistant type work. So that was a change for us, and that's as we're ramping up the School of Extended Learning, that's important to have that available. And I'm going to skip down to the bottom while we're talking about School of Extended Learning. At the same time, we have about $1 million increase in the budget to cover all the instructor salaries that are related to SEL as they ramp everything up, okay? So the additional revenue they're bringing in does have an additional expense that comes with it, but it's well worth it. We also have to keep in mind that SEL is increasing our center status funding for Wake and Shot because they're bringing more FTS to the two centers. And our center status was declining, so now it's going back up to the kind of the prior levels. Let's see, what else? This one is really fascinating, this third bullet point. Our health benefits actually went down. It's like unheard of, don't tell anyone, you know. So we saved $420,000 in our budget there. PERS and STIRS continues to be an ongoing issue. You know, the rates continue to go up. So in 18-19, the employer contribution rate increased to 18.06, and that's an increase from 15.8%, so about a 0.5% increase. And then the STIRS and the STIRS piece increased from 14.43% up to 16.28. So a pretty large increase. That's a 1.85% increase on the employer rate side. Okay. All right. We're doing great. I know this is super exciting, huh? It's like, yeah, you guys are riveted on the edge of your seat.
It's because we have no background knowledge on any of this new stuff. It's like new learning. Isn't it great? It's like,
it's great.
Like, oh.
It's great. I know. At least Cornelia loves it. She loves numbers. Okay. So here we go, diving into the numbers on the unrestricted general fund. We've talked a lot about this information, so I don't know how much we really want to dive in, but there's these variant slides that come after this. So just kind of try to take a snapshot of this, or if you have it handy, keep this handy as we get into the variant slides. But here we're seeing our increase in our revenue. And on this, the expense side, first of all, let me just point out right here, we have this new line, the appropriations for contingencies, so that's the $6.5 million. Okay. Then academic salaries, classified staff, employee benefits. That's kind of the primary areas where you're seeing our increases. Now, this is really hard to understand and kind of wrap our heads around. We have to remember that unaudited actual from 17-18 really came in well below budget. We base our budgets on having people in their positions. So these numbers jump up right away just because we're assuming we're going to have all the full-time faculty here that we expect to have. There's not going to be people resigning in the middle of the year. We're going to fill all the positions we expect to fill. We're not going to have unfilled recruitments, et cetera. So these numbers do jump up. We've talked a lot about RAP and our projections and how we're going to continue with the RAP work, the educational program efficiency savings that we're working on, those strategies that we've talked about in our projections of trying to get out of the structural deficit. We still have plans to continue with that type of work. But it's really hard for us right now with the tools we have available to adjust our budget to incorporate those savings that we do expect to see. So I do expect to see these salary numbers to come down as we continue with the RAP work and continue with the educational program efficiency savings work. But for right now, these are based on people being here in their positions. Okay. Going into more numbers here. Sorry, this doesn't all fit in one slide, but that's intended to be a part of the previous slide. So it's kind of a continuation with the grand totals here. So transfers in, sorry, this should be pointing at this 829,000 here. The transfers in include money we receive for grant administration and also $429,000, which is the rest of all of the extended learning reserves coming over into the general fund, also to help offset those new School of Extended Learning expenses that we're going to have in 18-19. Okay. Transfers out are quite standard. The only one that's come up this year that wasn't really a part of our projections is this equipment fund, the $375,000. Way in the past, you'll recall we used to transfer a couple million to there. It would cover things like all the program review requests and the IT refresh. And we had a plan for our deficit to spend down the balance that was in the equipment fund, and we've successfully done that. So now we do need to start transferring money back into that from the general fund to, it's only for the IT refresh budget. They have a $750,000 budget, and if we don't put $375,000 in there, they won't quite cover it. So there's a little bit left in the equipment fund to cover the bulk, but we do need to transfer a little so we can stay at the $1.5 million board policy reserve level on the equipment fund. Okay, and this construction fund transfer has been pretty much standard for a while. It was slightly higher last year, if anyone's comparing, because we decided to take an item out of here and put it into the general fund. That's an ongoing expense. It shouldn't really be transferred over there. So really, it's a wash. Okay, so here we are back to these black and red numbers, you know, kind of the topic of the evening and the week. Right here, you're seeing that after all of our new revenues, the $9.2 million increase in new revenues, and the $6.5 million that we put into the appropriation for contingencies, you're seeing that we're ending with a negative number here, this $1.5 million deficit. Now, this is a really strategic approach to our budget for 18-19. This is very intentional that we have a deficit here. We are continuing, I'm kind of going to repeat myself, we're continuing our work that we've set forth on the projections. We know we have a structural deficit where our revenues are not covering our expenditures and that we need to continue to work to bring down those expenditures. And we're going to continue to do that. So that coupled with the uncertainty of this new funding formula and the new revenues, and that we don't even get our final simulation, our final revenue numbers until February of 2019, we feel that this is really the best approach to continuing to show a deficit here with all the information we have at this point in time. Also, we really want to put a lot of effort into doing what we can for rehiring for those positions that have not been hired for over a year now or a year, and also providing as much as we can within reason to our faculty and staff who've worked really hard for us and trying to get them closer to the median salary range. So that's something we're really focused on. Okay. So I think we can kind of skip over these unless someone's got a burning desire to. We can come back to them later, but this just goes through in all the detail of the 17-18 actual compared to the budget and why there's variances. So hopefully this is clear enough for everyone, but there's always one-time changes each year that create these differences. And then we have the same information. Let's see, does anyone... There's not a lot of variances here on this non-resident international. That's often an important topic for us, but we're holding pretty flat there. We'll have to see how this year shakes out with the students coming from out of the country. There's a lot of changes with that, with folks not being able to get visas and come over. So that may be a little wishful thinking on the international side that doesn't decline for next year. Or this year, sorry. It's hard to speak in this year and last year, budget and actual. Okay, and then this is the expense side. Again, there's a lot of variances on the expense side, but here's all the details for all you budget lovers. Some of the highlights we've kind of already talked about, so I won't spend time on this, but you can go through it on your own, or we can come back to it if anyone has specific questions. Okay, fund balances, everybody's favorite topic, my favorite topic. Okay, so 2017, this is the end of the year balances we have. That year, does everybody remember this? Okay, we have one new trustee. I'm gonna explain this a little bit more, in a little bit more detail here for you, Dr. Miller. So our ending fund balances, our reserve details are made up of our board policy. And what that is that we have 5% of our reserves set aside, and that's per the state mandate. We have to have that no matter what. But the board also assigned that we need to set aside our bank TLU amount and an additional 15% on top of all this. So it means that our designated ending fund balance is about 21.5%, 21.6%, depending on the year. So that's tying back to this $20 million number. I love the math for our budget is so easy because $100 million, 20%, $20 million makes it very easy. Okay, so we ended that year, 2017, with $27 million in our ending fund balance, which means that $7.7 million of it was undesignated. It was above and beyond the board policy. So that's what this is showing us. So then you can carry out into 18, and then 2019, based on our current budget, here's where we would be landing, where we would still have $6.7 million over the undesignated amount. So you see these numbers go up and down based on whether we ended the year with a surplus or we ended the year with a deficit. Okay, so remember this is going down because we're expecting to have a deficit. Okay, and then here is what it looks like in our favorite chart. Okay, the yellow line here is the minimum fund balance, about $22 million that we have set as our board policy for our minimum fund balance. The blue is the general fund, red is equipment fund, and green is construction fund. So some history here. You can see the red, the equipment fund. This is where we used to set aside money for program review and IT refresh, and we used to allow folks up to 3 years to spend their program review money. So the balance was quite high because money wasn't getting spent, but we kept it set aside, so it kept kind of growing and growing. You can see that was the case for these few years. And since then, we've changed that policy so that folks, when they get their program review request allocated to them, they have the 1 year to spend it. It really helps with our budgeting and helps us keep this from having an unnecessarily high balance and not allowing us to use those resources for other needs. We are considerate though, if someone really needed the money and they just couldn't get to it that year, we will continue to set it aside. That happens a lot with the larger IT projects where the money was set aside, but they couldn't get to it that year. Okay, on the green, the construction fund, you see this year 14-15 to 15-16 where it grew dramatically. So that was the year that we set aside money for the campus center project. When we were going to be doing that project, the state was providing a chunk of the money, but the district had to provide the other piece. And we set aside money into that fund for that reason. So you kind of see some of the blue dollars shifted into the green. And the board has been committed to leaving that balance in there in the construction fund for the campus center, which is why we kind of have this bubble down here for 17-18 and 18-19 on the construction fund, because there are a lot of different balances made up within that construction fund. If you look at the campus center balance back in 17-18 compared to where we're going for 18-19, you do see some spend out of there because we did spend some money last year on the critical improvements that needed to be made, and we're going to do one more project, a shear wall project, in 18-19. But I wouldn't expect this to go down any farther than that. I don't have any expected projects beyond that. And our construction balance here is, the board minimum policy for this is $2 million, so we're a little bit above that right now. Okay, that actually went faster than I thought. There's a lot more slides, but you know, we can peruse through them if we want or not. Up to you guys.
Jonathan, yeah. Did it answer your questions, or you still want to, Cornelia and?
Oh,
and the
yeah,
folks
my
to chime
question
in?
was completely separate from like the functional parts of the budget, which, thank you, Lindsay, I understand. But my question was about priorities of what we do with some of the surplus money that we're going to have. And my question to Cornelia was, what are your thoughts in terms of, you know, what percentage of our faculty right now is adjunct, and what would be a good number to reduce to if that's was something we would want to do? And I would ask Lindsay how much something like that would cost. Because I know that maybe we don't want to determine that yet because we're doing negotiation. Yeah,
exactly right.
But that's something I'm interested in, is reducing our adjunct to full-time, and I want to know how much that would cost.
I'm not sure if I truly understood the question. Can you?
My question is, we have a certain number of adjunct faculty, and I think, and you know, I've talked to many folks about this, is it would be better to convert adjunct to regular full-time faculty. And I want to know how much something like that would cost. Like if we're at 25% adjunct and we want to reduce to 10% adjunct and make those 15% into full-time faculty, how much would something like that cost?
I don't know if we've done those calcs, actually.
If we want to do this, we need to change and do it. We need to get the state to
Cornelia, can you maybe come to the mic?
I very much appreciate your question, but before this happens, the state really has to significantly increase our funding, because system-wide, unfortunately, community colleges are funded based on the expectation that a significant percentage of classes is taught by part-time faculty who are usually lower paid than full-time faculty. The difference in pay for a full-timer compared with the same number of TLUs of hours by part-timer is about $65,000. So if we want to, whenever we want to basically take 30 TLUs per year, and instead of having these 30 TLUs per year covered by a part-timer now being covered by a full-timer, we would have to add $65,000
For each.
for each.
Because you have
It's
salary.
about the difference.
No, I understand how it works. I just think it's, you know, in the bigger picture, it's better to have more full-time faculty than adjunct. I think that's something I've heard a lot from both faculty and non-faculty, like people in the labor community. So I was just asking, like, is that something?
That is totally true,
Yeah.
and we have what we call the 75% law, so statewide. The idea was that 25% of classes are taught by adjunct faculty and 75% are taught by full-time faculty. I'm not sure, I can't remember how many decades we already have this law, and what I learned was that it actually got worse ever since that was enacted. Nobody, the state is not really enforcing that goal, right? They are trying to make attempts, but all these attempts are combined with, you need more funding. You need to fund the colleges better if you want that to happen, and as long as we are not getting that funding, that is a problem. But thank you so much. I appreciate that you are following that request from faculty. And yes, it is for sure better if you have full-time faculty who can devote their full attention, their full time working here at the college and not having to circle around on our freeways and have to teach at 3 colleges to make a living.
Right, yeah, that's the concern that's always been brought, is that we have these freeway flyers. That's what, I would love if we could figure out maybe, not even, like, if it's 25 to 20%, like, I know the state standard is 25, but if we could just see maybe numbers of that, because we have ongoing revenue for the first time, like a big amount, even if just a portion of that could be to converting to full-time, it would be nice.
Well, the hope is that the state is earmarking, or has earmarked $50 million towards full-time faculty hiring, which they are still trying to figure out how they divvy that up between districts. So this is why Lindsay could not include that in that calculation, so that would come in addition, and that is usually then earmarked for, this will be earmarked for full-time faculty. My expectation is that this is at least $500,000 for us.
For us, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any thoughts? Yes, Trustee Miller.
I'd like to have a little better understanding of the contingency fund. As I understand it, it sounds like a good idea. And we are doing it because we have uncertainty about what the actual dollars are going to be, and we won't know that until February. So number one, I'm curious, is this something the state is mandated, or we're just doing it as a good idea on our own?
We're just doing it because it's a good idea on our own.
Good.
Yeah, the state's not mandating this, but, several of the districts, a lot of them, are in the same situation we are, where it is so tenuous. We don't want to commit, the entire budget out there until we actually understand what our revenues are going to be. We're in great shape compared to some of the districts that are in hold harmless mode or trying to build back different metrics here that will bring them in additional revenues. But we just want to make sure that we've got a space in our budget that'll take care of contingencies that we just don't know about right now.
So let's assume that we get to next February and we've only spent $500,000, and we got $6 million left, and then it would be up to us to decide at that point how we want to allocate. I mean, if we have more confidence at that point that we can spend that money, we would then be making another decision as to how we spend it at that point.
Probably decisions before that, but
Yeah.
yes, conceptually, you're absolutely right.
And Trustee Miller, the big piece that's really unfamiliar for me is that at this point, we usually have finished negotiations or passed through COLA, something like that. So that's a very big change for this year for our budget. And with negotiations still ongoing, we have to wait until that's complete to know how to complete our budget.
Understand. Thank
And
you.
that's exactly what I'm saying, that, hopefully way before February, we're going to be able to resolve that part of it and come to you to be able to make the adjustment and pull out whatever we need from that contingency fund to take care of ongoing expenditures related to salaries and expenses, once we get that settled out. Because usually it's the FA, we get that settled, it's me too with all the rest of the bargaining units.
Understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Allocates, thank you, wonderful.
I'd
Yes.
just like to make the comment to thank Lindsay and James, because we've gone through a lengthy process of making these budgets ever more transparent and clear, and why is this number the number that it is? And you guys are doing a terrific job, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I see this budget, to me, you guys are looking at, if you're going to get that much more money, but it's because it's costing you more money to set up a center to support a student at the different services that they need. So then you're getting that. But then you're also saying, yeah, we're spending more on school-centered learning, but then they're increasing revenue, and that's going to impact the facility. And so I feel like just there's a lot of really big picture things that you guys captured that I think you guys are hitting on equity, you guys are hitting on faculty teaching, you guys are hitting on student services, and it all kind of sounds it's all going to lead into that like pathways. So I think this is great.
I really do want to compliment Lindsay and James in pulling all this together, because it's been so tenuous. But I also want to reiterate how proud we are of the faculty and what they've done. When you look at those metrics, the success metrics that we have, the faculty, the staff, and the managers have really stepped up to make all of that happen. Sometimes people think, well, this is just kind of a windfall, if you will, for the college. But no, actually, the college and every single person here has enabled those numbers to happen. And there's some grand opportunities, as you point out, for us to really capture additional revenues. I mean, for example, the School of Extended Learning, we have CDCP, the Career Development College Preparation area that could be expanded further. You saw that the revenue that we generate from that particular component is about $5,400 or something to that effect. The dual enrollment program, if we can expand that, that's another area that we excel at. And so, I mean, there's areas like that that are really grand opportunities for us to continue forth and really do well with in terms of our revenue.
Yes, agreed. Any other thoughts?
I want to second everything they just said.
Great, yes, that deserves a round of applause.
Especially for speaking in a language that's understandable rather than in econometrics.
Accounting geek.
That's a new word.
Accounting geek is what.
Awesome. Well, it is 7 o'clock. I hope you guys all get dinner, because my dinner's somewhere. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Is there a
So moved.
second? So moved. Is there a second? Second, Trustee
Second.
Miller? Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Haslam and seconded by Trustee Miller to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.